Chapter 1582. In the sky, outside the compound magic formation, there were hundreds of looming veins of various sizes. These symbolized that Eligos was frantically extracting elements from a brand new magic net to support the operation of these powerful magic formations. In fact, he was not the only one benefiting. At this moment, a bright river of arcane light was hanging upside down over the entire Northwind taiga. It floated in the sky where the cold wind howled, like a long river flowing with countless amethyst crystals, emitting a bright light. With its support, the combat power of these blue dragons had more than doubled. The Warsong orcs near the Warsong stronghold suffered a devastating blow. In the midst of the rumbling explosion, many orcs on the sentry towers were blown away with a bang, falling from high places and turning into large red and green meat patties. The unlucky soldiers below the stronghold were either thrown dozens of meters away by the violent explosion and landed heavily on the rugged slope, or had their heads cut in half by a piece of wood. There were also dozens of pieces of wood or iron that pierced through their bodies. They did not turn into corpses on the spot, but they had to suffer for a while before they died. In the wilderness, Garrush had a hard time catching a forgotten mage who was running around. It was a messenger. He grabbed the thin bone by the collar. "Where's the alliance? Didn't those thin guys claim to be our allies? Now their allies have betrayed them. Have they betrayed us too?" The forgotten mage was in extreme pain. Although he did not feel any pain, he still struggled hard. Garush's crude methods embarrassed him. The Sleeping Dragon Temple, the Alliance, and the Horde announced an hour ago that the Blue Dragon King Malygos had been corrupted and was already an enemy. "You ran too far, we couldn't find you at all." Garush was greatly offended, because this meant that the blame was likely to be on him. He did not regret it because this was a normal hunt for the clan. In Nagrand, there had to be at least one such large-scale hunt every week, or the clan would starve. "No," Garush roared hoarsely. "This is all the fault of the Alliance. This is a trap. They put us here on purpose to lure us." As expected, despicable outsiders cannot be trusted, Garush roared. Little did he know that when he vented his anger and roared, he had unintentionally stated at least one truth. The forgotten mage bitterly said, "The Wormrist Temple is not under the Alliance's control." Even Alexstrasza couldn't stop the Blue Dragon King from going crazy and challenging Arthas. This has nothing to do with the Alliance. Moreover, the Alliance was also attacked. He expressed the opinion of the majority. There was nothing wrong with that logic. The Alliance army had a faster reaction time than the Horde because other than the Magic Communication Direct Squadron, the Alliance had many other rapid communication systems. In addition to the spiritual owl communication of the Night Elves, there was also the divine power communication that only the members of the Elun Sisterhood could use. After magical communication became chaotic and intermittent due to Malygos creating a second weave, divine communication became the most effective and fastest method. It was a pity that there were too few female priests who had the ability to use divine power communication. Only high-ranking priests could do so, and they would not be able to use it unless it was a critical moment. What the Alliance was testing was the telegraph. After diesel engines became popular, Duque spent a lot of effort to develop and promote electromagnetic induction generators. It was not difficult to generate electricity by constantly rotating electromagnetic coils. As long as one was in an engineering university, there was no one who couldn't do it. With the advent of electricity, the invention of the telegraph was inevitable. The problem now was the decay of electricity and the problem of heat during the transmission of electricity. High-voltage transmission, then using substations to reduce the voltage back to civilian use. Duque understood the principle, but to put it into practical use, it still required a lot of practice and experiments. At the moment when Duque's weave was being challenged, it was indeed a good time to launch the telegraph system. The closer it was to Malygos' lair, the less efficient Duque's weave was. Of course, the part of the weave that Duque concentrated on protecting was still working well. For example, the two large fulcrum points, Naxxramas and the Fearless Stronghold. The Alliance's communication system did not collapse, and naturally, its defense showed extremely exaggerated efficiency. In the magic mirror, when Duque saw the blue dragons flying from the horizon, He couldn't help but complain, "Who on earth gave them the courage to challenge us?" Then Duque added in a low voice, "I bet it's not Liang Jingru." Seeing the blue baby dragons that were not even baby dragons, Bulang Bronzebeard also sighed. This is definitely a feast for the Dalian mages. Dragon remains were rare and precious, not to mention the blue dragon scales, fur, and limbs that were rich in magic power. Because of their good relationship with the sleeping dragon temple, except during the second battle of the Dark Portal, when the Red Dragon army was enslaved by the Horde, the Dalian and Duque ruthlessly plundered a wave of red dragon materials. There was no such good opportunity again. Today, a good dragon skin of about 1 square meter could be sold for 10,000 Arather gold coins. After sighing, Bulang said loudly, "Prepare to use the cannons to tell those big lizards that the anger of mortals is too hot for them to bear." Oh, the soldiers below all showed a state of inexplicable excitement. Under the lead of an ancient colossal blue dragon, more than 10 adult blue dragons led hundreds of dragon whelps, as well as close to 10,000 dragon whelps. They spread their wings and rode the strong winds, sweeping over from 10 kilometers away. Although they were still far from the blue dragon's range of attack, the long river of light and shadow of the arcane magic that swayed in the void behind them had already made the soldiers of Naxxramas realize that if they were to judge their attack power based on their size alone, they would definitely suffer. The blue dragons moved faster than expected, and in just a few blinks of an eye, the blue dots on the horizon became bigger. Although they were still out of sight, with the help of the high-magnification periscope, the Alliance's gunners could even see the scales on their wings clearly. The deep blue eyes in the eye sockets and the long, crisscross dragon teeth made people feel even more uncomfortable. Naxxramas was like this, and the fearless fortress was also facing a similar situation. At this time, Duque's voice sounded in the front line of the Alliance army. 23 years ago, in the second battle of the Dark Portal, I led your father's generation, a total of 200,000 troops in front of the wall of Thoradin, and it was difficult to move an inch, all because of the rampage of an ancient red dragon. Today, 23 years later, we face an even more exaggerated opponent. But I want to say, with the development of technology, mortals have really set foot on the world stage. We have cannons. We have airships. We have enough power to destroy all evil. So, I hope everyone will give these guys who dare to go against the tide of history a good look what technology is. All troops, listen to my order, fire in turn. However, he was the only ancient giant dragon in the entire blue dragon troop. Fortunately, each stronghold only had 3 or 4 longsong cannons. Although the power was great and the sound was frightening, the low frequency of the bombardment made the loss within an acceptable range. The blue dragon began to accelerate. Within the range of 5,000 meters. The flying battleships and medium-caliber cannons on both sides of the stronghold also began to fire. After a flash of flame and rising smoke, the cannonball came whistling over. In the deafening roar of the cannons, the damage caused by these 400mm cannons also shocked the blue dragons. They had no choice but to use their S-shaped maneuvers to rush over. Even closer, on the wall of the fortress on the side facing the dragons, countless complicated and intricate arrays suddenly flashed through the holes. In the void, there were also purple magic veins that provided magic support for these large and small arrays. Immediately, countless fireballs, ice arrows, and arcane cannonballs smashed out. With the support of the large-scale war arrays, these spells had a longer range and more power than ordinary mages' spells. A magic storm welcomed in front of the blue dragons. The dense spells crossed hundreds of meters and swept across the entire group of dragons like a storm in May. This time, these flying dragons that came to attack the Alliance under the command of their Mad King no longer had any luck. The high-density and powerful anti-air cannons and magic made all dodging and defense meaningless. In an instant, their wings were pierced or their bodies were directly blown up, and they fell from the sky while wailing. The land and the sea in front of the 2 strongholds were all dyed by this dirty blue blood rain that exuded arcane brilliance. That's it. On the 2 strongholds, the gunners operating the short-range anti-air cannons were stunned. My 8-barreled cannon hasn't even been fired yet? The concentrated anti-air cannons often did not have a good range. The real effective range was often about 500 meters. Since the long-range cannons had been solved with Type 3 bombs, then there was no need for the short-range anti-air cannons. A group of nervous anti-air cannons before the war all had constipated expressions. A middle-aged officer slapped the back of the head of the complaining gunner and scolded, "Damn it! If Commander Marcus could come up with so many good things during the second battle of the Dark Portal, I wouldn't have to shiver like a cat in a pond." The gunner touched the back of his head, which was a little painful. Why didn't Sir Commander take them out back then? Bullshit. Technology is not that easy to make a leap. Even if Sir Commander is a true genius, it still takes countless scientists and craftsmen to turn his vision into real equipment step by step. In the North Wind Taiga, the situation of the Alliance and the Horde formed a sharp contrast. The Warsong clan was like a rabbit being chased, with countless beastmen being chased all over the mountains. The Blue Dragons used magic to wreak havoc on the squads of beastmen soldiers who dared to resist. From time to time, they swooped down and hooked the beastmen with their sharp claws, tearing them apart in the air, or catching them in midair and throwing them down in freefall. Garush lost his mind and angrily ordered the wyverns to attack. As a result, in front of the purer chromatic dragons, the wyverns that had once swaggered around were all trembling. The lucky ones directly ran away with their knights, not listening to any commands, but at least they managed to keep their lives. The unlucky ones were directly targeted by the adult blue dragons. 2 blue dragons flew over, grabbed the wyverns with even more rapid movements, and tore them into pieces in midair, forming a stinking rain of blood. The Alliance, it's all the Alliance's fault. Garush roared wildly, but he really couldn't do anything about the flying lizards that were flying high and low. After the few wyverns and a few ballistae were slaughtered or destroyed, the Warsong clan on this land completely collapsed. At the same time, in the elemental domain invisible to mortals, Duque was engaged in a real magic battle with Malygos. Chapter 1584. Duque had once imagined that the two webs would fight for Azeroth's elemental energy, just like a hacker war. The two opponents would stay in areas where they couldn't see each other, remotely controlling everything in the network world, frantically attacking each other's positions, searching for each other's location, in order to deal a fatal blow. In reality, Duque had thought too much. If this battle for the Demon King was described as a hacker war, it was more like one side had prepared a virus, a firewall, and so on, while the other side ran to the other side's building and pulled the switch. What kind of illusory war was this? Because both sides knew where the other was, the so-called magic war was like a brawl from the start. Duque had never thought that Malygos, who was destined to die, would be so shameless as to think of a way to cut off the flow of elemental energy in the upwind path where Karazhan was located. As the magic guardian dragon left behind by the Titans, he did indeed know a lot of the elemental mysteries of Azeroth, such as the specific location of the elemental river that extended from the planet's mantle, through the crust, and to the shallow surface of the upwind path. Malygos couldn't make such a large elemental river disappear completely, but he could make it temporarily change course. If Duque really was one of those traditional mages in Azeroth who relied on the mage tower to display their full strength, then he would be kneeling by now. The Mage Tower of Karazhan, which had once bloomed with dazzling arcane light day and night, now only maintained a minimum amount of light. Without the supply of elemental veins, the tower looked dim. To maintain the operation of the entire Mage Tower, they had to use the elemental energy stored in the elemental pool. For Duque, who was about to start a magic war, it could be said that his reinforcements had been cut off. He could certainly defend Karazhan to the death and continue to use Karazhan as the center of the webs to fight Malygos for control of the entire world's webs. This way, it would be like a lonely castle. Perhaps he could defend it for a while, but in the end, it would still fall. There was a saying in the art of war, "A lonely city cannot be defended." Duque's lips curled into a cold smile. Arthas, good plan. Syndagosa was a good fighter. She had been ambushed by Duque, and Arthas naturally felt that it was a pity. But it wasn't painful, because the fallen Malygos was the powerful subordinate he truly desired. With the powerful physical body of a dragon king and the magical ability that Arthas desperately lacked, such a powerful undead was the only thing that could truly help Arthas. Over here, Duque had clearly beaten Arthas into a dog, but Maligos, the brainless pig of a teammate, had to go over to serve himself. Duque was also speechless. When Maligos no longer acted on his own fantasies and delusions, he immediately became a super expert. For example, if Maligos successfully dismantled Duque's magic net core and inflicted heavy damage to Duque's magic net, the several 100,000 allied armies in no cent would immediately lose their most powerful defensive magic system. All of the alliance's mages would lose 50% of their power, as most of the military mages used the weave as a standard for learning and casting spells. Without the weave, many mages who forcefully advanced felt as though they were in a desert of elements, unable to draw even the slightest bit of elemental energy to support their magic. At that time, if Arthas joined forces with Maligos to launch a large-scale ice storm or something, the allied army would definitely suffer heavy losses, and they might even be in danger of being wiped out. Fortunately, Maligos, you're so inexperienced that you don't even know what the cloud age is, right? As a transmigrator who had experienced the birth of the internet to its explosive development, there were too many concepts on the internet that could be used for reference in the magic net. For example, the battle between single-core and multi-core. There was also the concept of cloud storage. Maligos was now like a super single-core computer with a super high-frequency CPU. His data storage ability and computing ability were all crushing Duque's. This was where his pride came from. Even if Duque had the help of the system elf, he might not be Maligos' match in a one-on-one fight. After all, as the king of magic, his brain capacity and ability to command and cast multiple spells were definitely godly in the truest sense. However, ever since Duque established the magic net, he had never intended to play with a single-core CPU. What he played was a classic multi-core. From Khadgar as the core, to the demon King Vec, lore who later joined as the secondary core, and then to the group of elemental emissaries. Then there were Jaina and Solarian who were the support controllers, as well as the Kirin Tor assembly led by Kale, and the high-ranked Dalajan mages. Almost every powerhouse above the Radiant Moon level was a commander in a certain area of the magic net. Duque had split up the authority of the magic net, causing the magic net to show unimaginable diversity. As for Khadgar and Duque's system elves, they only existed as coordinators. As for the cloud storage, it was actually the result of Duque's direct control of the magic nodes of most of the Alliance's main cities, transforming them into nodes of the magic net. Other than Darnassus, which was directly controlled by Elun, and Exodar, which was controlled by the Drenii, all the main cities were deeply connected to the magic net. The four major elements of earth, water, fire, and wind existed in parallel space across the entire planet of Azeroth. Every main city of the Alliance, in addition to having a superior geographical environment, was also the location of nodes of elemental veins of different sizes. Duque had completely copied the magic net blueprint and stored it in every main city of the Alliance that was under his control. It could be said that unless Maligos cut off the flow of magic nodes in all the main cities of the Alliance, as long as Duque's mind was connected to the magic net, he could send the highest authority to the magic net through any main city. In fact, after Maligos cut off the flow of the elemental river between the two main cities, he realized that something was wrong. Duque's control over the humans' magic net was not affected at all. Instead, he launched a fierce counterattack. First was the water element. Most blue dragons liked to play with the ice element. They felt that ice was very beautiful. Maligos' specialty was arcane magic, and he was also very good at playing with the ice element. Now, Duque's counterattack from the magic net made him very uncomfortable. Duque had cut off the supply of ice element to his magic core. Originally, Maligos had thought that this was impossible. The truth in front of him deeply stimulated him. Duque's virtual image was projected on a desolate island in the western outer sea of the North Wind Tundra. Next to Duque's projection stood a huge water elemental. "You've worked hard, Duque Hydarsis. My most loyal friend. It's an honor for us, the Hydarsia water elementals, to be able to serve you. This was the water elemental's way of returning the favor. Duque led the mortal heroes and killed the clone of the Balrog Ragnaros. He also cooperated with the Hydarsia water elementals to drown the entire molten core. The Hydarsia water elementals had always remembered this kindness. Chapter 1585. Duque couldn't figure out the connection between the water elemental creatures of the current material world and the water elemental world that coexisted in another space dimension in the world of Azeroth. Anyway, he could feel that the frost elements leading to the magic core had been completely cut off. It was the same kind of cut-off and diversion, but Hydraxia's water element was much more beautiful. Malygos's cut-off was actually a diversion, not a real cut-off. As long as Duque spent some time, he could still find a new elemental vein. The cut-off of the water element was really the kind that cut off without leaving a way out. Above the north wind taiga. Kacha! It was a sound that did not exist in the ears of mortals. Only existences sensitive to elements could hear this sound that sounded weak but was actually shocking. All the blue dragons who were fighting felt their hearts skip a beat. A huge wave of frost elements gathered from all directions in the north wind taiga. It wasn't gathering, but escaping. As if the stopper was pulled out of a water tank, all the frost elements near the Warsong stronghold were sucked into the void. Ripples of unease rippled in this elemental airspace, spreading in all directions. At this moment, all the Alliance and Horde mages in the north wind taiga could not sense the existence of frost elements at the same time. The only place that could make them feel the frost elements was Duque's magic net. Unfortunately, the magic net had shrunk so much that as long as they were more than 200 meters away from Naxxramas or the Fearless Stronghold, they could no longer summon frost elements. The blue dragons in the sky widened their eyes in horror. Their yellow vertical pupils looked left and right. At this time, they found that not only the water elemental world, but even the fire elemental world was no longer responding. Someone so powerful that they were unrivaled had forcibly cut off their connection with the fire elemental world. Alarms rang in their hearts. The blue dragons finally woke up from their dream of being invincible. Times had changed. It was no longer the era 25,000 years ago when the dragons covered the sky, stood at the top of the food chain, and could do whatever they wanted. Hydraxia's water element sealed the source of Malygos's frost element. By killing Lager's clone, Duque, who controlled part of the fire elemental realm's authority, also sealed the source of Malygos's fire element. At this moment, Malygos's dragon weave, which used the magic pivot as its core, seemed a little unworthy of its name. The only core element left in Malygos was the arcane element. Azeroth magic was very interesting. There were 6 main categories: arcane, frost, fire, nature, holy, and shadow. The origin of the world was clearly earth, water, fire, and wind. Water and fire each formed their own system, but earth and wind were included in the natural system. Nature magic was generally considered to be on the side of shamans and druids, and was not considered to be part of traditional magic. Holy was on the side of priests. Although it was magic, it was not under Malygos's control. Not to mention an Ing. The Titan granted Malygos the authority of the King of Magic, which was the authority to manage the magic of the 3 elements: arcane, ice, and fire. At this time, both ice and fire couldn't be used, leaving only the arcane element. Thus, the Warsong beastmen who were suffering in the vicinity of the Warsong stronghold were stunned to discover that the originally ferocious blue dragons, who were incessantly flapping their wings to drive away the ice elements and turn one beastman after another into ice sculptures, were suddenly silenced. The magic that could be used had become pure arcane magic. Gurus, who was still fighting fiercely below, could be said to have the deepest understanding of this. As a warrior who had stepped into the realm of heroes, Gurus was much more durable than the small fries. In addition, Sal valued him and gave him a set of Mount Hyjar-level warrior equipment. He became the only bright spot in this collapsed battlefield. In terms of hand-to-hand combat, Gurus was not inferior to these young or newly adult blue dragons at all. His gorgeous equipment allowed him to clean up one with a few axes. However, the blue dragons could also play magic. A large-scale ice shield. No matter how fast you were, once you entered the range of the shield, you would slow down and suffer frost elemental damage. The jump slash he had learned from his father had become a clown's awkward move. Often, he would be frozen in midair like an ice sculpture the moment he jumped high. Even if the blue dragons did not slap him down with their claws or tails, he would still fall in a ridiculous free fall. The blue dragons suddenly couldn't use frost magic, so his chance came. With a big jump, he stepped on the wreckage of a ballista that had been blown away and performed a beautiful double jump. Garrush was like a rock spreading its wings, pouncing on a young blue dragon that could not dodge in time. In a panic, the young dragon barely flapped its wings and dodged to the left, but because of the angle and momentum, the dragon's neck was grabbed by Garrus, who reacted faster. With a backhand swing of his axe, Garrus chopped off the young dragon's neck. Holding the long dragon's neck in his hand and swinging the limp dragon's head, Garrush fell to the ground with a loud crash, raising a huge cloud of dust and letting out a deafening roar. Ah! Garrush, who had fallen into a frenzied state of killing, did not know a human proverb that someone had passed on to him: "Don't show off, or else you'll be struck by lightning." In every tribe, there would always be a small number of mutants. For example, Krasis of the Red Dragon clan was a rare master magician among the dragons. Galagos, the ancient blue dragon leading the team, was, in a sense, an ancient blue dragon that was not recorded in Azeroth's official history. However, he was indeed different from the blue dragons. For example, his element was wind. Seeing how Garrush was so awesome, killing several blue dragons in a row, and then demonstrating his might and roaring, Galagos sent a lightning strike to Garrush. Bam! Just a moment ago, he had used a roar to replace who else? Garrush, who had come to mock the group, collapsed on the spot, his long fangs gnawing on the frozen soil of the North Wind tundra. Perhaps it was because of the dizziness and paralysis caused by the lightning strike that interfered with his movements, but Garrush did not get up for a long time. Just as Galagos rushed down from the sky, a surging arcane dragon's breath brewing in his mouth, a 10-story tall human shadow suddenly appeared in the void. It was the shadow of Duke Marcus, the demigod of the weave. Duke's shadow raised his left hand gently, and a burly figure that looked 70 to 80% like Garrush rushed out of a portal that suddenly opened. He leaped high like lightning, and the blood-red axe swung from bottom to top like a moon at the bottom of the sea. It was clearly an upward chop with similar movements, but this chop gave Garrush an unparalleled shock to his soul. It was a chop that could split the heavens and the earth. The cold air hovering in the air, the storm, the turbulence of arcane elements. These things that could not be seen with the naked eye were all swept away by the aftermath of this chop. The next second, Galagos let out an extremely shocking scream. Chapter 1586. A guy who had the ability to severely injure an ancient dragon with an axe was rare, even among the heroes. If it was an orc, then the range was even smaller. Garrush struggled to get up and looked into the sky. A blue claw as huge as the pillar of the hall was spinning in the air. In the background, there was a sky full of splashing blue-purple blood, shining with arcane light, and a giant dragon with a face full of fear. The ancient dragon, who had a mocking expression a moment ago, had its facial features squeezed together because of fear. An adult blue dragon fiercely pounced over. The green figure falling from the sky suddenly twisted his waist so that his body was parallel to the ground. In the next moment, the falling momentum suddenly stopped. This change in rhythm made the adult blue dragon, who was trying to sneak attack, extremely uncomfortable. Just as the blue dragon flapped its wings to slow down so that it could aim at the orc again, the tall and sturdy figure launched intercept. A horizontal movement in the air that violated the laws of physics. A blood-red arc of axe light lit up again. Then the dust settled. Another cloud of blood mist exploded. Another blue dragon that was struck down. The Blue Dragon Legion in the sky seemed to be completely shocked by this scene. They all let out terrified screams and flapped their wings in panic to escape at high speed. Only then did the tall and sturdy figure descend from the sky and land heavily in front of Garrush. Under the effect of gravity, this figure was like a giant, but also like an insurmountable mountain. Mortals could only look up. Many middle-aged orcs recognized this great orc. It's Grom Hellscream. So young. I heard that he turned to the human demigods and became an oracle to obtain eternal life. What a pity! But he will always be the great hero of our clan and even the entire tribe. After a short moment of hesitation, the simple minds of the orcs made them unconsciously cheer for the real hero. Grom, 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 the warsong beastmen who were lucky enough to survive the siege of the Blue Dragon Legion all beat their chests with their fists, using the most traditional and primitive method to pay their respects to their former chief, the great hero who would forever stand on the monument of their tribe. Looking at the familiar and unfamiliar face in front of him, Garrush had mixed feelings. This face overlapped with the face of her father in her childhood memories. Young, arrogant, and filled with an insufferably domineering aura. There was no powerful prey that his father couldn't catch. Even the legendary powerful monster Golem, who could not be dealt with by an entire clan, fell at his father's feet. That was why he was able to inherit a great surname, Hellscream. He would not be like those lowly laborers who did not deserve to have their own surnames. Garush's emotions were extremely complicated. Once upon a time, as a pure-blooded orc, he felt ashamed because his father was the first to drink the devil's blood. When he found out that his father had not betrayed the tribe, but had successfully killed Manaroth, who had deceived the entire tribe, he was overjoyed and proud of his father. Later, my father got old and couldn't fight anymore. His perception of his father took another 180-degree turn. Why don't you die on the battlefield before you grow old? Die a ridiculous death on a sickbed? You don't look like a great orc warrior at all. You actually want to become that human demigod servant to repay a debt of gratitude after your death? The great orcs never need to repay any kindness to anyone other than the orcs. Hero? Nearly a year ago, the strong and healthy Garush scoffed at his father, who was old and weak and constantly tortured by his old injuries. Who would have thought that this day would come? At this moment, at this moment, at this second. In front of this fortress named after the glorious battle song. The person who turned the tide and saved the Warsong clan was not him, Garush, but his father, who he regarded as the shame of the clan and even the entire tribe. Climbing up from the ground, Garush's protruding fangs were still stained with dirt. His face was flushed with shame. Fortunately, as a pure-blooded orc, his reddish-brown skin covered up his embarrassment. He should have called him father. But the inferiority complex of the past, coupled with the arrogant declaration he had made to his old father before his death, made him completely at a loss as to what kind of expression he should use to face this legendary and contradictory father, who had also become a human oracle after death. His mouth squirmed for a long time, but in the end, not a single word came out. Interestingly, as his father, Grom, also did not say a word. Of course, his slightly sighing and sorrowful eyes could also be translated as son. Dad is very disappointed in you. In this regard, Duque, who was in midair as a spectator, felt that it was very funny. If this scene was accompanied by Beethoven's Symphony of Fate, in that sorrowful music, Duque would probably instantly lose his character and laugh out loud. As a transmigrator, of course, Duque knew why the famous Garush was called Brainless Roar. The stupid things he had done in the original history were simply brainless. Duque, who was familiar with history, did indeed have the opportunity to help Brainless Roar change his fate. The problem was, why did Duque have to do this? In the past, Duque had hoped to redeem Arthas and stop him from going astray. But he and Karazhan were blown into the void. No matter how many times he thought about it, Duque still felt that Arthas' fall was the result of a mixture of chance and necessity. The current Brainless Roar, regardless of whether his high IQ of 5 could be saved. First of all, as a human, Duque was not in the position to help an orc or even help the entire tribe become stronger. Teaching a foreign barbarian race to stab themselves to death with a knife was something that Duque would never do. Secondly, the rise of the pure-blooded orcs, represented by Brainless Roar, was already an irreversible trend in the tribe. Sal could not let millions of his compatriots die in Draenor. So, more pure-blooded orcs entered Azeroth than the total number of the tribe at that time. Although it strengthened the tribe's population, it also formed the strongest impact on the tribe's existing ideology. If there was enough food and territory in a peaceful environment, Sal could have brainwashed this group of conservative purebloods to accept new things for another 20 years. Perhaps the tribe could achieve a smooth transition. However, in history, the tribe's territory was twice as large as today's, and they still could not solve this contradiction. In this world, where Duque had premeditated to command the Alliance to seriously squeeze the tribe's living space, how could the tribe make a smooth transition? Sal was now equivalent to being roasted on a fire. As long as the pressure from foreign enemies weakened a little, the contradictions in the tribe were bound to erupt like a volcano. In conclusion, Duque could see it clearly. Whether he killed Brainless Roar in advance or not, there would be new pure-blooded orc heroes who would challenge Sal's leadership and shake the foundation of the tribe's rule. Sooner or later, something would happen to the tribe anyway, so it was better to keep Brainless Roar. At least Duque did not have to be the clown, and he did not have to do this and that behind Grom's back. Chapter 1587. In terms of talent, Braindead Roar was indeed unparalleled. In the realm of warriors, he could even beat Sal. In terms of warriors, only the Ox Chief Cain Bloodhoof could beat him in the entire tribe. However, Duque already had Lord Howl, so why would he still need Braindead Roar? Comparing the way Braindead Roar cut the adult blue dragon and the way Lord Howl cut the ancient blue dragon, the difference was obvious. Braindead Roar would only blindly squander his talent, mindlessly slashing at the enemy's vital points, completely ignoring any changes in the process. After Master Roar regained the body that was at its peak when he was 18 years old, his 50 years of rich combat experience was undoubtedly revealed in the strike just now. Changing the rhythm just right, he seized the fleeting opportunity to strike fiercely after disrupting the opponent. Adjusting the direction of the axe blade with his wrist, he skillfully dodged the adult blue dragon's final counterattack. Without reducing his speed and strength, he avoided the hardest head of the dragon race and cut diagonally into the dragon's neck, causing the greatest damage. It was no exaggeration to say that with an indestructible 18-year-old body and half a century of bloody battle experience, Lord Howl was worthy of the title of a legendary hero. Only such a Grom Hellroar was the peak of the peak, worthy of Duque breaking the boundaries between the Alliance and the tribe and accepting him as a god's messenger. In the sky, Duque clearly saw the hilarious scene of Lord Howl and his sons staring at each other without saying a word. The relationship between orc father and son was quite deep, but the way they got along was often clumsy. Just like how Durotan could sacrifice himself to save Sal. However, most fathers would only teach their children to be great warriors, but not how to be a human. Sal in this life only had Orgrim's personal guidance to achieve his current achievements. Lord Howl and his son, anyway, Duque could not bear to watch. On the eastern horizon of Battlecry's stronghold, a dense cluster of black dots suddenly appeared. In the blink of an eye, the black dots could be seen in color: red, green, bronze, and a small amount of blue. The distant roar of dragons from the sky announced that the previously silent Dragonsleep Temple was finally making a big move. At a glance, thousands of giant dragons covered the sky. They were galloping from the more eastern Dragonbone wilderness. With 3 guardian dragons that were as large as small mountains in the lead, they were accompanied by 2 smaller black dragons and blue dragons on both sides, forming the first echelon of attack. Behind them were hundreds of ancient giant dragons, then thousands of adult giant dragons, and tens of thousands of young dragons. This time, the 5-colored giant dragons had come out in full force. On the ground, Garrosh finally understood why the blue dragons had fled in panic. With their strength, going against Long Sleep Shrine's main force was simply sending themselves to their deaths. Sigh. Lord Howl sighed. He did not know what tone he should use to communicate with his son. He knew that his son hated him. Lord Howl of life. However, in the face of his son in trouble, In the face of the calamity of the clan that he had sacrificed his entire life for, he simply could not bear it. Dragon of. Duque did as he wished. The person was saved, but the person who was saved did not even say a word of thanks. Grom's heart must be very complicated. At this time, Grom raised his famous blood howl and shouted, "The blood of our brethren cannot be shed in vain. Today's grudge will be avenged today. Those who are still breathing, follow me to kill the demonic pivot and slaughter those treacherous blue dragons." Oh. Hundreds and thousands of people responded. As long as the beastmen could still fight, they simply bandaged their wounds and followed Grom to kill their way to the shore. The battle in the sky was destined to have nothing to do with the Warsong beastmen, but the Draconians and Draconians loyal to Malygos on the ground could be slaughtered to vent their anger. Grom had to do this. A defeated clan would definitely be looked down upon by the other beastmen clans. If he didn't want the clan that had given birth to him, raised him, and made him fight for his whole life to fall, he had to lead these defeated soldiers to pay blood for blood in the shortest time possible. Perhaps for a dead former chief, this was crossing the line. At this time, Grom's first consideration was the legacy of the clan, not the face of the son of the Warsong tribe's chief. When Grom reached out to his son with his right hand, he wanted to pull him up. "Come, slap." Garrush slapped his father's hand away. "I can fight. I can get up myself." With that, Garrush gripped his battle axe and rushed to the front of the group. "Warsong beastmen, follow your chief, forward." The Warsong beastmen all looked at Grom. When they saw Grom nod slightly, everyone followed Garrush's steps. This made Garrush feel even more ashamed. The shadow of Duque in the sky no longer looked at the Warsong beastmen. The shadow gradually became real. Duque's real body had already descended into the sky above the Northwind tundra. Beside him, several elemental emissaries stood in the air. At this time, Alexstrasza arrived. "Alexstrasza, it's time to put an end to this." "Okay." The Red Dragon Queen's huge head nodded slightly. Nothing saddened her more than her own flesh and blood killing each other. On the other side, Onyxia lowered her head slightly, revealing the back of her neck. As long as Duque nodded, a chair would appear on her dragon's back for Duque to sit on. Duque sent a telepathic message. "Today isn't suitable." Onyxia, who no longer had any integrity, obviously didn't mind being Duque's mount as a dragon aspect. The other dragon aspects did. After all, this was a battle between the dragon aspects. Even Kalegos had stood up for him. If Malygos was proven not to have stepped into the realm of death, the dragon aspects would try to solve the problem through dialogue. If Malygos really did die, then before he became a bone dragon, no, a Dracolic even more terrifying than a dragon of death, the dragon slumber temple would really have to destroy Malygos. Looking at the floating magic island standing on the western horizon, Duque was filled with emotion. He could restrict Malygos from obtaining the two major elements of ice and fire, but he couldn't do anything about the arcana. The arcana didn't come from the four major elements. As for the origin of the arcana, it was impossible to know. Arcana magic was more like the Pantheon's unique source magic. In theory, the arcana energy was an even more primitive energy. Since there wasn't a single arcana world, the mysterious arcana energy could never be cut off. With Malygos' ability, he could even infinitely convert the other elements in the world into arcana energy. Rather than using the magic net as an arena to fight an endless tug-of-war, it would be better to put all his chips on the line and eliminate Malygos in terms of material concepts, ending everything once and for all. Chapter 1588. Oh Malygos, I see that you have a fierce look on your face, and your bones aren't special. You're wearing a green grassland on your head and whatnot. His wife was ridden by Arthas as a mount, and even he had to be ridden by Second Fool. So dragon liches and bone dragons aren't suitable for you. Yes, birds. Ghost dragon, not bad. Green ghost dragon king. High and mighty. Go go. Duque had already made up his mind to get rid of Malygos in the magic pivot. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fun if Malygos and Arthas merged. After all, Malygos was also a king. If the two kings merged and Arthas really became an ice dragon knight, then the power would be too great. One had to know that this wasn't the concept of 1 + 1 = 2, it was equal to 3, equal to 4. Although Second Fool was strong, the lack of super powerful magic skills was a hurdle that he couldn't avoid with the Death Knight template. Once Malygos fell into the trap, the consequences would be unimaginable. Duque had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. For the army of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, the distance of 100 or 200 kilometers would only take a short while to kill. The magic pivot was the Blue Dragon Army's nest in the center of the Kodara Highlands in the northwest of the Northwind Tundra. It was surrounded by countless lightning-like arcane energy, and there were dark black ice buildings everywhere, as well as vertical icicles. Several ancient blue dragons led a small army of blue dragons and hung outside the magic pivot. In front of the incomparably huge Sleeping Dragon Coalition army, these few hundred blue dragons weren't enough at all. Lady Alexstrasza, Lord Nozdormu, Lord Isra, Lord Onyxia, even if you have the status of dragon aspect, bringing a dragon army to the magic pivot is still an offense to the blue dragon army. The leading ancient dragon lowered his head slightly. All egos. This is none of your business. Get Malygos to come out and see me. Otherwise, even if I have to dismantle the magic pivot, I will see him today. Alexstrasza didn't fall for it at all. She didn't give the ancient blue dragon any chance to play tricks. Duque squinted at the blue dragon and chuckled in his heart. In the original history, this guy lost the competition with Carrie and joined the Twilight Legion. In the end, he was stabbed in the back by Blackmore from another time and space, and his blood was used to activate the nuclear bomb, Focused Rainbow. Right now, Duque just smiled and didn't say anything. Half of the Blue Dragon Legion was frauds, while the other half was weaklings. Anyway, there were too many things to complain about. Duque didn't even know where to start. On the other side, facing the aggressive Red Dragon Queen, the 3 dragon aspects, and their own traitor, Kalegos, who was leading a group of opponents. Even all egos couldn't handle it. Alright, I'll go ask His Majesty Malygos. Then a drama of slipping away was staged. Damn, when it flew away, even its tail was drooping. Originally, Duque didn't think that Malygos would come out. In Duque's imagination, anyone with a bit of brain would choose to escape directly, or even kidnap a large number of blue dragons to escape to the Icecrown Glacier. But he didn't know if it was because Arthas didn't completely control Malygos, or because he simply gave a mental hint and didn't make a move. The entire magic pivot suddenly shook violently. The surrounding clouds were all shaken away by this surging arcane energy. After a burst of dazzling purple-blue arcane energy blossomed like a flower, a huge blue dragon flew out from the magic gate of the magic pivot. Roar! He didn't know if Malygos' high IQ was driving him, or if his soul was still stuck in the past 10,000 years ago, thinking that he was still the lord of all things, the dragon aspect that was regarded as holy by all creatures. Anyway, being stared at by that pair of golden vertical pupils, Duque didn't feel anything. Instead, he seemed to be smiling. Malygos opened his mouth and revealed his fangs. Ha! My brothers and sisters! Are you also here to witness this despicable person who blasphemed the holy domain of magic, the self-proclaimed demigod of the weave, Duke Marcus, commit suicide in front of me? He was instantly out of character. Please forgive Duque. Even though he was the best actor from the 1st to the 26th Azeroth Dark Portal, Duque still had the urge to quit acting. Alexstrasza wanted to say something, but Duque interrupted. Malygos, do you recognize what this is? With that, Duque raised the thing in his hand high, and then Duque slowly flew towards Malygos under the support of the wind element. Oh! Malygos looked at Duque coldly. He stared coldly at the thing in Duque's hand. Although he knew at first glance that he didn't recognize it, he enjoyed the feeling of looking down at the tiny Duque. After a while, he replied slowly, I don't recognize it. What's wrong with it? Duque wasn't annoyed. This thing is called a soul casket. It contains the soul of the great Draenei Holy Light Teacher. Perhaps you don't know, but he was the one who fought against the 2 Burning Legion commanders, Archimonde and Kill Jaden, 25,000 years ago. He was one of the 3 giants of Eridar. The indifferent Malaigos still didn't know what he was facing. On the contrary, the dragon face that still looked lively had an expression of waiting to watch a show. Seeing this, Duque didn't want to continue acting. Duque shouted, "If you've fallen, then please accept the punishment of the holy light." As soon as he finished speaking, the soul box suddenly emitted a brilliant golden light. The dazzling divine radiance instantly covered the entire magic core area. It was as bright as the rising sun, but the entire sleeping dragon legion and almost all the blue dragons didn't feel anything. Holy light was a typical holy spiritual energy. It didn't do any harm to the righteous formation or even the neutral. Instead, those with good intentions would be encouraged and enjoy additional combat power. 99% of the dragons were fine. Except for one dragon, the great king of magic, Malaigos. Wah? Despicable humans. What did you do to me? The blue dragon king, which was almost half the size of a town, flapped his wings desperately. The arcane energy swirling under his wings was like illusory colorful clouds. When the colorful clouds formed turbulence and dissipated in the air, the sparks of arcane light had already formed arcane missiles of different sizes. When these highly concentrated arcane missiles landed on the ground, the entire open space in front of the magic core region was bombarded by elemental missiles. There were terrifying continuous explosions everywhere. In the sky, the giant dragons that were hovering were all stunned. Many of the giant dragons almost forgot to flap their wings and fell. Every dragon could clearly see that there was a huge decaying wound on Malaigo's chest. Chapter 1589. The circular wound was so huge. Putting aside the dark aura around the wound, just the size of the wound alone was enough for a carriage to run through. Even giant dragons were shocked to see it. In the eyes of the blue dragons who followed Malaigos, their boss chest had only lost a scale and left a sword mark. In the eyes of the dragons, this injury was no different from a mosquito bite for a human. It was not a big deal. However, in front of Old Man Valen's ultra-pure holy light, all concealment was meaningless. The dark power of Frostmourne had not only pierced through Malaigo's chest, but also his heart. The Blue Dragon King had actually died the moment it was stabbed. It was purely the heart that continued to move under the drive of the dark power, maintaining Malaigo's life on the surface. Arthas also very cunningly did not let his power seep into Malaigo's blood. He only captured the Dragon King's heart and affected Malaigo's will. Malaigos, who was already seriously deranged, did not even realize that he had been manipulated. He thought that it was a decision made by his own will. If not for Duque's holy light at the beginning, the kind-hearted Alexstrasza might have really been fooled by Malaigos. She might have thought that her brother was just having a mental episode again and not betraying the path of guardians. Holy light and the power of shadow were never compatible. Perhaps it was possible to transform holy light and shadow like Duque, but there was no way they could exist in the same place at the same time. Malaigos still seemed to be alive on the surface, but in reality he had already stepped into the realm of death. Under the holy light, it directly melted, revealing the dark heart that was in intense conflict with the power of holy light but still beating. Wow. Even if he is a dragon king, with such an injury, I'm afraid. On the surface, Onyxia was concerned about Malaigos. The Black Dragon Princess, who did not have a good nature, was not interested in this emotional world. She was actually indirectly reminding Alexstrasza and the other 2 dragons that it was time to work. Sadness. She did not want to admit this was the truth, but she had already experienced cruel betrayal once. Malaigo's passive betrayal made Alexstrasza feel better. Oh, he was actually forced. He fell for the Lich King's tricks and sorcery. Nozdorm was the first to accept reality. As the space-time Dragon King, he had seen countless futures. In those divergent branches of history, Malaigos had died for no reason and looked for his own age*T so many times that he was too lazy to complain. As the space-time guardian appointed by Titan, he had to maintain absolute silence. Even if my heart is bitter, I can't spoil it. Nozdormu was a little surprised to see Malygos become like this in the main timeline, but he was more relaxed. Killing a brother who was already dead was much less of a psychological burden than beating him to death. Izura sighed. My brother, let me help you free yourself from this crazy nightmare. Although Alexstrasza was reluctant, as the leader of the Pentashade Dragons, she had the self-awareness of being a role model. She raised her head, and her voice spread across the sky. Malygos, my brother, I feel very sorry for what you have gone through. However, the duties that the Titans have entrusted me with make it so that I have no choice but to announce that the Dragon Slumber Temple has officially relieved you of your duties as the Guardian Dragon. Next, we will purify you as a blasphemer. Accept the divine punishment and rest your soul in peace. Malygos was in a mess in the wind. In fact, he was the one who suffered the biggest blow. What happened to the King of Magic? How did he suddenly go from a high and mighty guardian dragon to a street rat that everyone hated? The determination of his brothers and sisters, the various ancient dragons who were originally doubtful but now had firm eyes, and the blue dragon subordinates who were originally obedient were retreating. He had always felt that the whole world revolved around him, but now he suddenly felt that the whole world was full of hostility towards him. Malygos was already a little crazy, and now he was even more unable to accept reality. But, why? This was Malygos's question to himself, and also to his former brothers and sisters. Alexstrasza's eyes were full of sadness. Malygos used to be such a positive and optimistic blue dragon. It was hard to look back now. My little brother, come to think of it, your glory ended 10,000 years ago. Since 10,000 years ago, when the arrogant Malygos was severely weakened, he still did not hesitate to cooperate with almost the entire Blue Dragon army to take revenge on Nisario. Everything was destined. Destined madness, confusion, and the end of the road. Either this or that would always lead the mentally ill Malygos to the end of the road. Alexstrasza couldn't help but sigh at this cursed fate. It was not that Duque did not remind her, but she was always emotional and blinded by family. The Red Dragon Queen roared at the sky. That was the order to attack the entire Sleeping Dragon Coalition army. Kalegos's performance was brilliant. He rushed to the Blue Dragons who were still loyal to Malygos and shouted, My fellow Blue Dragons, our king is long dead. He is already a slave of the Lich King. If you don't want to become a zombie dragon and be buried with him, surrender immediately. Lower your altitude, lie on the ground, and show the emblem of the Sleeping Dragon Temple. This was the Blue Dragon version of giving up and not killing. Perhaps King Malygos had broken the hearts of his subordinates in the past 10,000 years. If it was not for the fact that he had participated in the killing of Nisario, not many Blue Dragons would have taken him seriously. Now that the old king was dead and had become a slave of the Lich King, naturally, not many Blue Dragons would be loyal to him. They were even more cowardly than stray dogs. They quickly dropped to the ground and lowered their noble heads to the Sleeping Dragon Coalition army, which represented the supreme force of the Sleeping Dragon Temple. No, I'm not dead. I'm still alive. My heart is still beating. Why are you all looking at me like that? In the sky, facing the 4 dragon aspects that surrounded him, Malygos was still arguing with himself in a neurotic manner. At this moment, an evil and vast will suddenly descended. He had the deepest aura of death, the coldest will, and the most evil and cold voice. He was, of course, the mastermind behind this, Lich King Arthas. A huge illusory head appeared behind Malygos. Malygos, from the moment you came to the Ice Throne, you were my possession. Yes, you are already dead. It is I, the great Lich King, who personally granted you eternal death. Arthas, whose face was covered by a blue-black ice helmet, only had his 2 blue eyes flickering. Chapter 1590. No. Impossible. I only suffered a small injury. Malygos used his claws to dig at his chest in vain, as if he wanted to dig out all the rotten flesh there. However, his claws had only touched the edge of the black heart when his body twitched in pain as if he had been electrocuted. Idiot! Still not accepting reality? Arthas was a little tired of facing such a deranged fellow. On the other hand, if Malygos was not in such a state, he would not have been able to capture a Dragon King so easily, even with the home advantage of the Ice Throne. At first, he seemed to be a little angry, but then Arthas sneered. "Forget it, you've already failed. Then I'll take back what belongs to me. In any case, no matter what, victory will only belong to me, the Lich King, Arthas." Following Arthas' declaration, Malygos suddenly let out an earth-shattering scream. No, it should be called death wail. That was the resentment towards his inexplicable death, the resentment towards all living beings. This kind of howl on the soul level, even as strong as the guardian dragons were momentarily stunned and unable to move forward. Malygos' dragon body was changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. On the black heart that was clearly visible in the rotting hole in his chest, the aura of death that had been nurtured for a long time pulsed at high speed to every corner of his body. The beautiful blue scales that had been as blue as the sea on a clear day became snow-white, a paleness that symbolized bones and death. The dragon skin that relied on flesh and blood to support it shriveled, and the originally bulging dragon body instantly became thin. In all of Malygos' joints, white bone spurs broke through the tough dragon skin and grew out. The once gorgeous Blue Dragon King had turned into a ferocious and terrifying monster of death in just 10 breaths of time. At the same time, his control over magic power did not degenerate with the passing of his life. The entire magic pivot responded to his summons and bloomed with even more dazzling arcane light. Not only that, in the lower part of the magic pivot, a large number of monsters rushed out. Everyone looked and was shocked to find that not only were there dead dragon men and half-dragon men, there were even dozens of blue dragons that had long since become corpses. All egos exclaimed, "By the Titans!" Malygos said he sent them out on a mission. At this moment, there was a commotion at the back of the dragon slumber shrine. A violent snowstorm suddenly appeared in the sky. Needless to say, this was definitely the work of the Lich King. More importantly, taking advantage of this snowstorm, the eyes of the hundreds of blue dragons that should have died long ago on the North Wind tundra battlefield suddenly blossomed with a fierce blue light. Flapping their battered bodies, they flew into the sky and fiercely attacked the sleeping Dragon Alliance army. Allegos' dragon face turned pale. Heavens! His Majesty, no, Malygos rewarded us with some delicious meat after he returned. He was already forcing himself to vomit. Plague was the specialty of the Scourge army. In the past, Kel Thuzad had used the plague to turn the Rotterdam kingdom into corpses. Now, his target had changed from humans to dragons. No one knew if Malygos was conscious or subconsciously manipulated to poison the blue dragon under him. Anyway, it was an indisputable fact that the blue dragons that had died on the battlefield had all turned into corpse dragons. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood why Malygos still slapped the red dragon Christ Asa so hard in this life. Malygos didn't know that he had stepped into a land of death, but his survival instinct still drove him to leave descendants for himself. The Red Dragon clan was a clan that represented life. It was probably because of this instinct that he pushed Christ Asa forcefully. Sigh. Duque sighed. Looking at the corpse dragon Malygos that had started to go crazy, Duque couldn't help but feel pity for him. A pitiful dragon must have something hateful about him. Everything was a cycle of karma, retribution. The scene became chaotic. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Arthas gave Malygos a death order. "Malygos, my mount, come back. Your mission is complete." Originally, Arthas' idea was to get the benefits first. As long as the corpse dragon Malygos safely returned to Icecrown Fortress, the strength of the Calamity army would definitely increase greatly. Unfortunately, just as Alexstrasza underestimated Malygos' mental illness, Arthas also underestimated Malygos' ego and arrogance. Perhaps, in Arthas's imagination, Malygos, whose soul had already been captured by him, would listen to his orders and escape during the chaos. In reality, Malygos had gone crazy. "Duke Marcus, it's all your fault." Malygos, who had already transformed into a death dragon, didn't take the opportunity to escape. Instead, he charged at Duque. "Huh. The dumbfounded Duque felt like he had been implicated. The next second, Duque laughed. Let's just say that he laughed out of extreme anger. Me too, I actually took a lunatic seriously. If I took it seriously, I would have lost. A spiraling golden flame rose from Duque's raised right hand. It was the officially named Song of Light and Darkness, a personal artifact of Duque. The holy golden sword was raised high. Bystanders could only see the golden light shining on the tip of the sword, but as the king of time, Nosdormu saw something else. Time passed quickly. The scene before him seemed to have happened in a future that he, as the Bronze Dragon King, did not know. After Duque pulled out the sword, what he was about to do was to return the fate of Maligo's death to its original position in a strange trajectory. Nosdormu looked at this scene in shock. Time was still flowing, but it returned all cause and effect, leading the entire world to a brand new future. What kind of power was this? Or was what he saw purely an illusion of a tributary of time? Before Nosdormu or the other two veteran dragon aspects could react, Duque had already activated the special effect of the sword, Demon Slayer. It was not inferior to the golden light released by Valen at all. The holy light made Maligos feel a tingling sensation all over his body. His weakened nerves and lost dragon body would not feel pain. It was pain on the level of the soul. This pain brought him a strange feeling, and he suddenly fell into a trance. At this moment, Maligos heard a cracking sound in the air. He raised his dragon head and found that the arcane energy he was so proud of had actually solidified, forming a strange blue solid substance that looked like dough. It floated in the air. Chapter 1591. Only then did Maligos notice that the solid arcane elements that looked like pieces of plasticine were surrounded by white mist that emitted a cold aura. The arcane elements were divided and wrapped by the frost elements, turning into strange purple-blue ice particles that rustled down from the sky. At some point, a piece of white frost was climbing up Maligos's right paw. Ice instantly formed in the gaps between his fingers that he didn't notice. It wasn't until he accidentally moved his toes that he realized that his legs were creaking. As soon as he opened his toes, there was the sound of ice shattering. The former Blue Dragon King was shocked. This situation made him realize the seriousness of the situation. He finally realized that he was losing control of all the elements. He subconsciously and pessimistically believed that his power had greatly declined. In fact, he was really wrong this time. As the King of Magic, how could his control of the elements decline so easily? However, the magic circuit was a derivative of the soul. A moment ago, Maligos had officially gone from a half-living state to a pure dead person. His soul was undergoing a drastic qualitative change. In fact, although the magnitude of this qualitative change was great, the process was quite short. As long as he calmed down and quickly found a new soul sense, he could regain his combat power as long as he found a way to manipulate magic power in the soul state. Didn't you see how Anastrian, the Sun King, was very good at fighting when he first became a lich? The funny thing was that thinking too much was also a kind of psychopath. Psychopaths couldn't help but let their imagination run wild. Arthas had tried to preserve Maligos' spirit as much as possible in order to make him a death knight like Nazul had trained him to be. Now it seemed more like a bad move. Psychopaths were double-edged swords. In Maligos' imagination, since Duque could cut off his sources of frost and fire elements, he should be able to cut off his arcane elements. As a result, when Duque attacked, he foolishly gave up control of the arcane elements. The process was so smooth that even Duque was surprised. He would be a bastard not to take advantage of it. Duque accepted the control of the arcane elements that Maligos gave up without hesitation. The group of blue dragons, no matter which faction they belonged to, all looked at Duque, who was in mid-air, as if they had seen a ghost. Even though the King of Magic, whom they once worshipped and obeyed, was still in mid-air, they could not suppress the fear rising from the depths of their hearts. If he didn't know that Duque was a close ally of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, perhaps even Calegos would have hurriedly backed away from Duque. Duque was too terrifying. Even in the face of the oldest King of Magic in the world of Azeroth, he could still seize control of all elements in an instant. Without magical elements, the mighty king of magic was nothing more than an undead dragon with a slightly stronger physical body. The purest ice element surrounded Duque's body. Due to the strong winds beneath his feet, the chill that emanated from Duque's body was so intense that even the ordinary dragons that were slightly closer to him could not withstand it and flapped their wings to leave. Xianxia looked at her master in surprise. This was the first time she had seen Duque like this. In her impression, Duque was like a modest gentleman most of the time. Although he was more ruthless than anyone else in crucial moments, he rarely displayed such a threatening aura. Perhaps this was the so-called fight of the same origin. There was only one origin. If you took more, I would naturally take less. In the past, they were in the same trench, so Duque could not make a move. The situation now was completely different. Not only did Duque want to be ruthless, but he also wanted to take half of the origin of the next Blue Dragon King. Duque, who was familiar with history, obviously knew what kind of person the next Blue Dragon King, Cultivate, was. Apart from his appearance, whether it was before or after inheriting the title of Dragon Aspect, this fellow was a complete trash. If Xianxia could be said to be a low-level version of the Dragon Aspect, then Cultivate was used to make up the numbers. Duque did not want to divide the power of the magic net into dragons or mortals. The magic net is mine, and I have the final say. Use it if you want, or scram if you don't. Hence, Duque's sword was not only to kill Maligos, who had submitted to the Lich King. It was also to seize the authority of the Blue Dragon King in Azeroth. Maligos' hoarse voice seemed to come from the depths of the icy hell under the frozen throne. His blue eyes glared at Duque, and he gritted his teeth as he roared, "I knew you were a despicable thief. You stole the elemental authority that belonged to me. Alexstrasza, look at what you've done. You raised a despicable person who stole the power of the Dragon Aspect." The Red Dragon Queen was stunned. Even she was speechless at this crazy dragon who did not even know his own position. "You, Maligos, are already the servant of the Lich King, and you're still calling me a thief? Damn thief. Very well, I, Maligos, will let you have a good taste of my anger." Duque could not listen to it anymore. He put his sword behind his back, and when he got into a forward stabbing posture, there was a flash of holy golden light. The next second, Maligos screamed. When he raised his dragon claws, he suddenly realized that something was wrong with his body. His dragon body was strangely dislocated, and his upper body flew out as he pounced. The lower half of his body seemed to be fixed in place by a spell that stopped time, not moving at all. There was a crisp sound. Miraculously, all the dragons saw a golden spot of light appear on Maligos's waist. The spot of light quickly became a horizontal line parallel to the ground, and it continued to extend to the left and right. At the same time, with Maligos as the starting point, there was a golden line that connected Maligos's back to his lair, the magic pivot behind him. The golden line pierced straight into the huge Blue Dragon Legion's encampment. In the next moment, the golden line swung to the left and right, and then a ripple line appeared in the void. This line swept across Maligos's dragon lair, and with the golden line as the boundary, everything broke in the middle on the spot. There was a soft crack, and at the same time, it split into two halves, from top to bottom. Time seemed to have frozen. The word, astonishment, was written on every dragon's face. Maligos's dragon face was full of horror. Like a female dragon that had been raped, he screamed, "No!" because he realized that he had not only lost his body and power, but also the unique rule of Azeroth that was originally under his control. This was what he valued the most. Chapter 1592. To be honest, would Duque be afraid of Maligos? How was that possible? Even if the Blue Dragon King was at full strength, Duque would not be afraid at all. What had always restrained Duque was his good relationship with Alexstrasza and Isra. The Temple of Dragon Slumber had always been the first line of defense against the Burning Legion. If not for this relationship, after Duque became a demigod, he would have taught the crazy Maligos how to be a qualified dragon aspect. Come to think of it, Even if Duque went all out under normal circumstances, he still would not be able to kill Malygos in a second. After all, he was a dragon aspect that had been blessed by the divine power of the Titans. The reason why he was able to split Malygos in half in one move was that Malygos had courted death himself. More importantly, the former Blue Dragon King was not used to his current situation at all. From his body, to his mind, to his soul. The disorder in his soul caused him to temporarily lose control of the arcane elements. He had the entire magic core that had stored 25,000 years worth of energy, but he could not use even a little bit of it. The disorder in his body was because he was not aware of it. He did not realize that he had changed from a righteous creature to an evil undead creature. Needless to say, he didn't even realize who was his master now. He did not understand, did not accept Arthes's kindness to save him, and instead dug his own grave. Everything added together formed this exaggerated scene before them. The dragons all thought that Duke had only caught the last train in God's domain and that he still needed a long time to cultivate. However, Duke had actually killed the king of magic Malygos with a single move. Before Alexstrasza had recovered from the car accident in her emotional world, she had to face another shocking reality. Duque might already have the strength to stand on equal footing with her. Perhaps it could be attributed to luck, planning, and execution, but as the Red Dragon who had been watching Duque since the second battle at the Dark Portal until now and watched Duque's growth and rise, no one in the dragon race knew Duque better than her. Even so, she still felt that she had underestimated Duque. Originally, they had predicted that there would be an earth-shattering battle. After all, the other party was a powerhouse and had the advantage of defending their territory. Who would have thought that gathering so many dragons and gathering the other 3 5-colored guardian dragons at the demonic pivot would result in such an unexpected outcome? It was as if all the dragons flying in the sky had become witnesses to the battle between Duque and Malygos over the origin of magic. Arthes, the Lich King, who had been sitting on her ice throne and watching the drama unfold, suddenly stood up in shock. After a long time, she finally managed to squeeze out 3 words, "Damn it." As long as Malygos wasn't so stupid as to turn into a dragon and come under him. Not only could he spy on the higher level of the magical laws of this world, but he could also cause a real rift in the hearts of the dragon aspects. He even fantasized about the day when he could use the cracks in their hearts to make all the dragon aspects fall. This was not impossible. In front of them was Nethario, the Wing of Death, and behind them was Malygos, the King of Magic. Who could guarantee that the other 3 dragon aspects wouldn't fall? But now, because of Malygos's temporary stupidity, all of Arthes's plans were ruined. Bastard! If I had known, I wouldn't have set up so many schemes. I would have just taken him as a mount. Just as Arthes was throwing a tantrum, Malygos was actually putting on a clumsy performance, acting dumb. Duke Marcus, you despicable mortal, what did you do to me? Do you know that you are guilty of the most heinous crimes? Malygos spat like a resentful woman as he waved his front claws to grab his lower body that was falling from midair, in a futile attempt to reattach his lower body. Was this crazy dragon really not here to be funny? If the atmosphere wasn't so serious, Onyxia would probably have laughed out loud on the spot. Duque used holy light to activate the Song of Light and Shadow in his hand and broke Malygos's spine with one strike. It could be said that the key joints of the entire dragon's body were all holy light. Unless Malygos could cross the line between life and death and turn himself back into a living dragon of the Order faction, it would be impossible to reattach his body before the remaining holy light energy was cleared. Originally, whether it was Duque or the 4 dragon aspects, they should have taken advantage of his weakness to take his life. An unexpected situation disrupted all of Alexstrasza's plans. After the dragon aspect's holy blessing was removed from the insane Malygos, all the exclusive laws that the Titans had bestowed upon him should have been taken away. Now, because his soul and body had unexpectedly collapsed prematurely, dazzling light burst forth from his body, and countless shining Titan runes flowed out. Alexstrasza turned pale with fright. Not good. Kallegos. Hurry up and gather these runes. If you lose the inheritance of these runes, You will lose the mystery of the void protection matrix. Kalegos was stunned. He hesitated for a full 3 seconds before he reacted under Alexstrasza's urging. The structure of the dragon race was very strange. Within any dragon race, there was no such thing as a second brother or a second sister. After the dragon aspect, there were a bunch of ancient dragons. Even among the weaker black dragons and blue dragons in Dragon Ding, there were still 8 to 10 ancient dragons of this level. To be honest, Kalegos was not mentally and physically prepared to inherit the name of the dragon aspects. First of all, he was not strong enough. He had all sorts of weak performances, and it was almost impossible for him not to be seen as the shame of the blue dragons. Secondly, he raised the flag against Malygos purely because he felt that it was wrong to gather all the mana in the world for the dragon weave to use. Moreover, he was the most handsome of the dragon race. Not only did a female dragon like Martagosa love him so much that she was willing to go through fire and water for him, there were also many ancient dragons who liked him. Anyway, the group of blue dragons had been unhappy with Malygos' madness for a long time, so they might as well make a big deal out of it. With Alexstrasza backing him up, there was nothing to be afraid of. They had thought that this would be a grand negotiation or something. Who knew that things would take a turn for the worse, and Malygos was actually already a dead dragon. Even his position as a dragon aspect would be forcibly removed. Kalegos did indeed have the qualifications to inherit the Blue Dragon King's position, but he was not prepared enough. As soon as he came up, his limbs were in a mess, and he almost instinctively grabbed at the floating Titan runes. Seeing the group of dragon aspects want to die, they were all speechless. When she saw Kalegos accidentally shatter a Titan rune, Alexstrasza finally said, "Duque, go and help out." Chapter 1593. Picking up scraps? Was he trying to put a mouse in a rice jar? The serious and sanctimonious hypocrite Du Muk did a good job of concealing his inner joy. Oh no. If he were to be serious and show his joy on his face, wouldn't he be laughed at? This was a great benefit. If the power of the 4 elements could still be explored by oneself and reverse-engineered methods and magic formulas, then the high-level laws of the arcane were really not something that could be easily obtained. The magic that came out of the dragon race in the past was already a very rare emasculated version. After 25,000 years of development, some had been lost, and some had been changed beyond recognition by later generations. If he wanted to get his hands on the primordial laws, he had to work on Malagoth. Under normal circumstances, the Titan runes that had exploded would definitely not be touched by Duque. Unfortunately, the successor was not strong enough. The Pentashade dragon aspect only corresponded to one type of law, and the other dragon aspects could not touch the Titan runes of the magic type at all. But the Dragon Sleep Temple could not just let the Titan runes scatter everywhere. This was an even bigger matter than the betrayal of the dragon aspects. If there was a traitor, they would just have to kill him. Losing the runes was a great crime for the Dragon Sleep Temple. Although the Titans had not returned to Azeroth for more than 20,000 years, a group of Titan Guardians still faithfully performed their duties. Not to mention those far away, just in Otter next door, there were several guys who were at the same level or even half a level higher than the dragon aspects. Once the blame was placed, even Alexstrasza would not be able to bear it. Duque was a guardian recognized by the soul of Azeroth, after all, so it could barely be considered as a leak. In any case, other than glaring at him, the 4 dragon aspects could only charge over like a swarm of bees. They would first get rid of Malygos, who was foolishly playing with his corpse puzzle, and leave the easy pickings to Duke. Duke, who disdained to do lowly things like plucking feathers from geese and robbing people while passing by. Was there a need for Duque to take away some of the Titan runes? Nonsense. If they could just make a copy of the instance dungeon, why did they have to make it so ugly? In the eyes of a bystander, every single Titan rune was made up of thousands of smaller runes that were pieced together in an irregular manner to form a unique magic circuit, which then became a fixed law that was equivalent to the origin of magic in this world. The Titan runes were so complicated that it would take an ordinary mage 8 to 10 years to study a single rune. Was Duque an ordinary mage? Stop joking. With the help of the system elf, Duque had long since started researching and analyzing the Titan runes. With the foundation of observing the 4 great guardians in Alcavan's treasury, Duque already had a deep understanding of the Titan runes. He also had hundreds of millions of contingency plans in the system. All he had to do now was to compare that part of the runes with Malago's runes and deduce the possible magical laws and reactions. On the other side, 2 of the 4 dragon aspects were tearing up, while the other 2 were expressionlessly dismembering the dead Malagos. It was only a matter of time before Malagos, who only had half of his body left, was dismembered. Even a fool could not save him. On the other side, Duque was happily picking up the runes. On the other side, Kael'Kas had a bitter look on his face. The Titan runes were not something that could be picked up just by touching them. Every Titan rune contained its own unique law. If different types of elements or existences touched it, the rune would trigger a self-destruction system and collapse on its own. On the contrary, touching the corresponding law or element would slow down the reaction and become peaceful. However, this was only temporary. In order to truly return the runes to their original position, there needed to be a qualified carrier to engrave all the Titan runes into a powerful soul of a specific attribute. However, he suddenly realized that not only was his efficiency low, but his soul's ability to carry the Titan runes was also far from enough. As it turned out, Duque's work was even smoother than his. Left with no choice, Kael'Kas shouted, "Your Majesty Alexstrasza, I can't carry all the Titan runes. Can Sir Marcus help me carry some of them?" Red, green, and bronze, the 3 different skin colors of the dragon aspect's eyes bulged at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. It was fine to let Duque try it out. Your F***king successor can't even carry the complete inheritance. What are you doing? Alexstrasza, who had never been particularly good-tempered, could only suppress her anger and asked, "What do the other dragon aspects think?" Nozdormu, "It doesn't matter." Onyxia, ditto. Izura, "That's the only way." The red dragon sister glared at the useless successor Kael'Kas, then turned to Duque and shouted, "Duque, please take care of the Titan runes for a while until Kael'Kas recovers. Then, please transfer them back to Kael'Kas." "No problem. I swear I won't peek at the Titan runes belonging to the blue dragons." Just as Duque finished swearing, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the distant sky. Boom! A white light split the sky in the west. Duque didn't believe it. "As long as Sir Kael'Kas needs it, I will send the runes back at any time." Rumble! 2 bolts of lightning appeared in the north and south at the same time. "I, Duke Marcus, swear in the name of the demigod of the Azeroth weave. Rumble, 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 rumble." Lightning and thunder rumbled endlessly. Damn it! Which fellow Daoist is undergoing tribulation here? "Get the hell out of my sight." That was what he said in his heart, but in fact, Duque flew towards the larger Titan runes that had a heavier burden on the soul. Small runes? Hee, this young master system can analyze them in an instant, and I still have to pick them up a second time? The pure Kael'Kas didn't know. How could he know that Duque was this strong? All he could see was Duke shouldering the heavy burden and using his powerful soul to carry the large Titan runes. He was so touched that tears almost came out of his eyes. When he focused on picking up the small runes, his efficiency was greatly increased. 1 man and 1 dragon, they used the overflowing elements to maintain the floating Titan runes as much as possible. Then, they temporarily absorbed them one by one and fixed them on their souls. It took more than an hour for them to finish. During this time, the tens of thousands of giant dragons of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance surrounded this area as bodyguards. They couldn't go anywhere. On the other hand, on the ground, Lord Howl led the Warsong tribe's beastmen to kill the dead Draconians and Dragonmen. Malagos? That guy would have been torn apart long ago. Of course, his soul couldn't be captured. From the moment he was stabbed, the core of his soul was left in Frostmourne. Perhaps the next time they met, he could become a dragon soul lich. Chapter 1594. Kalegos, who had only managed to pick up a small portion of the Titan rune, finally smiled. The human-like smile on his dragon face had charmed the female dragon fans. Unfortunately, his big sister, Alexstrasza, was not happy. How could you be so complacent after obtaining such a small result? Could you at least have some ambition? Although she did not say it out loud, that was what the red dragon sis meant. Sister, don't be angry. There's nothing we can do about it. Give Calegos some time. Maybe he'll be better. Isra used a soft voice to persuade his sister. Sigh. Each generation is worse than the last. When Calegos can be half as good as Duque, I'll have nothing to worry about. Look at that little rascal. In Du's eyes, the red dragon's expression was clearly saying, "You're the worst batch of students I've ever taught." Of course, Duque pretended not to see her piercing gaze. After getting such a great deal, he did not show off and instead angered the dragon. Looking at the system notification, Duque was overjoyed. You've obtained Anti-Gravity Arcane Energy Thruster Initial Model. You've obtained Arcane Beam Cannon Spell Model. Although these things were from 25,000 years ago, they were still considered black technology in the present day. The most frightening thing about technology and magic was the lack of inheritance. With these Titan technologies, even if they were incomplete, Duque could still make a lot of good things. As for the red dragon's resentful gaze, there are so many ants today. Oh, there's even a Voldemort. The gentlemanly Duque opened the magic mirror right under the red dragon's nose and looked directly at the ants on the tundra hundreds of meters below him. The red dragon's did not have a temper anymore. Let's go back. Matagosa, Calegos still needs some time to digest the inheritance of the previous guardian. Take care of the magic pivot for him during this time. Understood, Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Matagosa nodded. A huge internal war among the dragons ended with the destruction of Malygos. Although it seemed a little anticlimactic, it at least prevented the already weak blue dragon army from further weakening. The adult blue dragons, dragon whelps, and dragon whelps had all been used as cannon fodder after Malygos had ordered them to attack the Alliance and Horde forces. This was the best way to preserve the Alliance's strength. In theory, as long as reproduction was encouraged, it would not be a dream for the Dragon Kingdom to prosper in a few hundred or even 1,000 years. Duque, who had obtained the greatest benefit, really wanted to hide and properly digest Malygos' relics. Even now that he had become a demigod, it was a very tiring task to calculate the usage of the Titan runes and the eternal laws within it with the system elves, which were almost equivalent to supercomputers. Blessings never come in pairs, but misfortune never comes alone. This old saying made sense. Just as Arthes was stirring up trouble everywhere and disrupting the rhythm of the northern expedition, something happened to Oder as well. Oder was always mentioned in the same breath as Odin and Odaman. Uldur was the Titan's third base in Azeroth. It was now controlled by the storm giants and their servants, the crystal golems. That was indeed the case on the surface. After Duque publicly announced that Loken, the guardian of the Church of Wisdom, was a traitor, the Dragon Sleep Temple had long regarded the entire Oder as a snake and a scorpion. Once they were free, they would beat him up. Dealing with Arthes, the blasphemer, was as important as dealing with Yogg-Saron, the enemy of the Titans. As soon as Malygos was dealt with, Oder sent a message. This time, it was Torim, the Titan guardian of the Church of Storm, who contacted the Dragon Sleep Temple to ask for help. Duque narrowed his eyes after hearing the news. If Oder, which had never been disturbed by the outside world, developed as it had in history, Torim, the Storm Guardian, should still be normal at this point in time. However, Torim's development was not going well. Originally, when Torim's wife died in history, he initially thought that it was the doing of the Storm Giant, but then he discovered the real culprit, his former colleague, Loken. Knowing that he would be greatly weakened if he left the Temple of Storm, he still went to the Temple of Wisdom to get even with Loken. Of course, not only did he fail, he was also raped. He was thrown into Oder by Loken to give Yogg-Saron all kinds of hardcore training play. Later, he became Oder's boss, and even his mount was given by Loken to King Vrykul, Immoron. It was a classic case of losing everything. Duque had a good impression of this loyal Titan guardian. After all, A man who could risk his life to avenge his wife could be called a real man. In fact, Duque still remembered when he finished a series of Torim's missions in the game and saw Torim being captured. After that, when he attacked Oder and saw Torim's wife, Eve, standing beside him, Duque was touched for a moment. The Guardian had already fallen. If he could reunite with his beloved wife, perhaps this would also be a kind of poignant happiness. Unfortunately, Duque was fed a mouthful of poisonous milk powder. That Heave was actually a female demon in disguise. Because even if Torim was contaminated by Yogg-Saron, a part of his will still couldn't be distorted, and he still missed his wife, Heave, in the deepest part of his heart. As a last resort, Loken found a female demon for him to pretend to be his wife and sent her to Torim as a mascot. The Guardian fell at the feet of the players. But every player's heart was heavy. After witnessing the end of a tragic love, they didn't feel that this was a victory worth showing off at all. Fortunately, in this life, after personally participating in the general trend of Azeroth, Duque had the opportunity to change everything with his own hands. After receiving Torim's message, Duque immediately sent out his messenger. The Temple of the Storm was a temple located west of Oder, standing on the peak of a snowy mountain. It was surrounded by lightning all year round, and ordinary creatures didn't even have the right to approach the peak. At this moment, the giant sitting on the huge throne suddenly let out an "oh." The slightly wrinkled eyebrows instantly relaxed, and a smile appeared on his thick lips. In front of the temple, on the huge platform, there was a continuous flash of lightning. The densely packed thunderbolts hung down like curtains, forming an impenetrable vertical net. At this time, several clusters of lightning twisted in the middle, revealing a small hole. In the middle of the hole, an arcane energy that didn't belong to the nature element began to spread. At first, it was just an inconspicuous small dot. In less than a second, it spread into a portal that could allow one person to pass through. A very young human-like existence stepped out of the portal. He strode toward the temple. Chapter 1595. Actually, this human was not walking slowly. Unfortunately, the temple was too huge. After all, the entire temple was built according to the size of a titan. The majesty in the titan's eyes was already so great that it seemed boundless to humans. Just from the high platform outside the temple to the side door of the temple, which could not be called the main door, was 3 times 3, which was the size of 9 football fields. He estimated that from the portal to the front of Torim's throne, it was about 5 kilometers. Guys who played with storms and lightning were never slow. The giant sitting on the throne snapped his fingers, and a blanket made of lightning appeared at the feet of the little human. The lightning did not hurt the human at all. Instead, it was like a mount, carrying the human at high speed to Torim's throne. The lightning circled behind the giant, as docile as a tabby cat. Other than the occasional crackling sound of electricity, there was no excess energy or damage. The giant spoke. I, Torim, the guardian of storms, specially sent a message to the dragon's slumber temple. Why is it an empty shell with no content? The young human smiled and bowed. You can call me Mark Dooku, the man who destroyed Sardra's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether. Of course, you can also call me by my name in this world, Duke Marcus, the Guardian of Azeroth. After saying that, Duke looked at the Titan Guardian through Mark Dooku's eyes, who was no stranger to him. Like most Guardians, Torim had an extremely large body. In terms of height, he was about the same as Alcavan and the other giants, around 10 stories tall. His body was more balanced than Alcavan's, more like a human. His slightly brown earthy skin made people think of the earth at first glance. He had a typical square face, with pinkish white hair that reached his chin, which was a little strange. Coupled with his extremely burly body and the huge warhammer that was constantly emitting lightning, the entire aura of a guardian came out. His pauldrons, belt, gauntlets, and leg guards all had blue edges and white background circular decorations, which looked like incandescent lamps. Although it looked a little ridiculous, anyone with the slightest perceptive ability would be able to sense the earth-shattering power of thunder contained within. As for his brown and black lace ribbons, they were negligible. Duque's words made Torim's expression turn serious. As a Titan Guardian, he did not care about anything that happened in the outside world. He only cared about his duties and everything related to the Titans. When the Titan left Azeroth, Sargeras had already betrayed the Pantheon. Torim knew this. Duque, who could make the traitor of the Pantheon Temple suffer a setback, naturally made him look up to him. After a moment of silence, Torim said, "All right, Duke Marcus, I admit that you have the right to speak to me as an equal. Before we start talking, let me ask a question. I remember that the place where I requested for help was the Dragon's Resting Temple. Why you here? Respected Lord Protector, the place you are guarding is only Orger. The place that the five-colored guardian dragon is guarding is the entire Azeroth. Just today, at the Ice Crown Glacier to the west of Orger, Arthas, the self-proclaimed Lich King, murdered the magic guardian dragon Maligos and almost turned it into a fallen Dracolic. The Dragon's Resting Temple's combat power is very tight, so they asked me, who is better at dealing with such things, to help." After saying that, Mark Dooku threw out a scroll. Torim raised his hand, and a cluster of lightning flew out. The scroll opened. Suddenly, a green brilliance lit up, and an illusory letter appeared in midair. The paper was full of Titan words written with faint divine power. This was Alexstras's handwritten letter. Every guardian had its own unique mark and way of writing, and it could not be deceived at all. After reading the letter, Torim completely trusted Duque. "Alexstrasa, Isra, and Nozdormu jointly recommended you as the full agent of the Dragon's Resting Temple to help solve Orger's crisis. After reading the letter, I have to admit that you are very powerful. You have completely surpassed the limits of mortals. Even I am envious of your achievements. Unfortunately, my mission binds me. Otherwise, I would be willing to fight against the evil people who betrayed the Titans with you. Thank you for your trust." Duque bowed again. "If the Temple of Storm has any trouble, please tell me directly." Torim let out a long sigh and told Loken's story. This was the same as what Duque had previously revealed to the Dragon's Resting Temple. Therefore, Duque asked Mark to pretend to be listening humbly, but in fact, he was dealing with official documents. Until he got to the point, Torim said with determination, "Loken killed my wife and turned my supporters against me. He took everything from me, but everything is about to change. Regardless of whether I have the Dragon Slumber Shrine or your help, I will personally go to the Wisdom Shrine and settle the score with Loken." Duque smiled. "Please do not doubt my sincerity. The existence that scourges Azeroth is my enemy. Since I have killed Thun, I don't mind killing another Yogg-Saron." After saying that, Duque took out a ring. Ring of the Fallen Deity. The attributes of this ring had long fallen behind the times. To be honest, Duque did not care about it. The key to the ring was that it was made from one of Thun's eyeballs. This was the best proof of that. Torim suddenly stood up, and his huge body was like a small mountain rising from the ground. "That's right. It's this similar smell. Even if this ring has been washed with holy light, I can still smell the stench of the god of decay." After seeing that Torim's emotions had been completely stirred up, Duque revealed a mysterious smile. "Admit it. Torim, your power will be greatly weakened if you leave the Temple of Storm. You can't beat Loken in the Wisdom Temple. But if you follow my method, I can guarantee that you will avenge your wife." As soon as Duque said that, Torim's blue eyes, which were already emitting a faint divine glow, lit up even more. "But tell me I'll do it. I still need you to suffer a crushing defeat at Loken's hands, but before that, I'll have to trouble you to go somewhere secretly." His wife's death had been stimulating Torim's nerves all the time. Without much hesitation, Torim nodded heavily. But that night, the wind howled and thunder and lightning flashed. Outside the Wisdom Temple in the north of the Temple of Storm, Torim raised the hammer of thunder and roared loudly on his beloved mount, the ancestor dragon Varanus. "Loken, I'm here, for Sif, for justice, for the watchmen who have been corrupted by you." Chapter 1596. The Temple of Wisdom was another temple that had a typical Titan style. No one knew if it was to intimidate those ignorant creatures, or if it was to save trouble when the Titans were creating things. The appearance of the 5 temples could no longer be described as shockingly similar. They were all made from the same mold. The temple at the top of the snowy peak was a huge ring formed by 8 huge Greek pillars that required 30 people to encircle it, forming a circular shape similar to a biscuit sandwich. Adorning the white marble pillars and stone rings were noble golden decorative patterns. The decorative patterns were matched with mysterious Titan runes that were difficult to understand. On the circular floor with a hexagonal shape as the core element, along the edge of the temple were divine earth lamps that looked like head rings. Bound by the outer frame of the half-metal, half-wooden earth lamps were balls of mysterious yellow energy, which provided a glorious illumination for the temple. However, at this moment, the Temple of Wisdom was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. There was no sound of wind or insects. It was even more silent than a tomb. Not only that, the interior of the pillars was shrouded in a layer of fog, making it impossible to see what was inside. Look, there's no point in running away. I know you're here. The huge progenitor dragon Varanus under Taurime let out a loud roar. Unfortunately, its master was too huge. This scene made Mark Dooku, who had followed Taurime to the top of the mountain, feel a little ridiculous. No matter how he looked at it, that sound just now was made because it was overwhelmed. After all, their bodies were almost one-to-one. Varanus did not have the long snake neck of his dragon relatives. His short and thick neck made his upper body look a little like a crocodile. Taurime landed on the huge platform suspended in the air of the Temple of Wisdom, and his mount followed suit. The progenitor dragon's forearms were its wings, unlike the giant dragons, whose forearms and wings were separated. Villainous huge and thick wings folded up, looking like a pair of arms with their own protective wings. Following Taurime into the Temple of Wisdom, Duque quickly read the data of the surrounding environment from the puppet. That's really smart. The enraged Taurime hadn't noticed the changes in his surroundings, but Duque had already seen everything through the data feedback. At this moment, the mist and darkness that shrouded the divine hall suddenly dispersed, revealing the giant sitting on the throne of wisdom. Compared to Taurime, his figure was similar. The biggest difference was that his entire body was golden from head to toe. He had golden skin, shoulder-length golden hair, and a golden square face. A white hairband tied his hair so that it hung behind his head, and there was an extra braid at the back of his head. His body also gave off a squarish feeling. 2 huge and long white shoulder straps hung down from his pauldrons and draped over his chest to his knees. That kind of pure white clothing and accessories made it difficult for people to see him as an ordinary villain. How should I put it? A hypocrite in white? Taurime immediately saw that Loken's throne of wisdom had been entangled by some dark vines, and he immediately revealed a pained expression. As expected, Loken, you've fallen. There was a smile on Loken's golden face. He stood up, raised his golden arms high, and said crazily, "Fallen? This should be ascension. My master once let me see the future, and there is no place for you in it. Azeroth will be reborn in the darkness, Yogg-Saron will be released, and the Pantheon will eventually fall." Taurime had a very straightforward personality. When he heard the words "the Pantheon will fall," he could no longer hold it in. "Loken, this is the Titan's trial for you." With that, Taurime threw his huge hammer that was filled with lightning. It was as if he was throwing an entire mountain. That was the ultimate power of Taurime's lightning power that had been condensed for thousands of years. Of course, the aura was extremely terrifying. It should have been like this. The moment the hammer left Taurime's hand, the lightning hammer shone as dazzling as the sun. Halfway through the air, it became like the setting sun. When the hammer landed on Loken's body, it had already become dim, like a firefly in the night. There was no need to calculate at all. Just by looking at it, it was obvious that the blow did not cause much damage to Loken. Loken laughed at Taurime's stupidity. "You might have a chance of winning if you fought me in your Temple of Storm, but once you leave the Temple of Storm, you're as weak as trash. You should learn from those big lizards in the Sleeping Dragon Temple. If it's not related to you, don't come here. That's right. Loken knew that Torim would lose most of his power once he left the Temple of Storm, so he deliberately lured Torim to his Temple of Wisdom for a decisive battle. Roar! Sensing its master's failure, the ancestor dragon, villainous, rushed forward with large strides, opened its huge mouth, and attempted to attack Loken. However, an attack similar to an electric arc descended from the sky and landed on the ancestor dragon's body. It looked like a lightning attack, but in fact, it had nothing to do with the wind element. It was an arcane attack. Villainous' entire body twitched, and it could not move. Torim rushed forward, but was immediately knocked down by another arcane arc and fell to the ground like a dead dog. Torim was in a state of shock and anger. He might have predicted that he would be at a disadvantage, but he really did not think that it would be such a difference. A small difference could perhaps be made up for with perseverance, willpower, and skills, but the difference between an ant and an elephant in strength was enough to make any existence despair. Loken grabbed Torim's neck and lifted his entire body up. "Let go of me, you let go of me," Torim roared helplessly. He desperately slapped Loken's arms and shoulders with his hands and feet, but to no avail. Originally, the two guardians were similar in size, so their strength should be about the same. Now, why did it feel like Loken and Torim were like a rough man molesting a little girl? At this time, a male voice suddenly reached the ears of the two guardians who were fighting. "Torim, is this the so-called Battle of Reckoning that you mentioned? How disappointing." The one who spoke was, of course, Duque. It was only at this moment that the two gods remembered that there was indeed such an inconspicuous existence. Loken had ignored Mark because the energy waves emitted by Mark were too weak. Torim, on the other hand, was a typical hot-blooded idiot. In his anger, he completely forgot about the existence of Duque. At this time, Torim turned his head in surprise and shouted, "Duke Marcus, do something." "Do something? I will." A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Chapter 1597. Snap. A crisp snap of a finger. A single gesture from this little human, whom Loken had never paid any attention to, caused a huge change in the situation. In the sky surrounded by the circular arcades, in the gaps between the giant pillars, and on the floor of the temple that was covered in hexagonal patterns, layers of yellow light appeared. These lights seemed to have a life of their own as they went straight for Loken the moment they appeared. Any guardian would have a passive talent called Titan's Blessing. This was a blessing that isolated elemental and physical attacks from the modern world from the perspective of the laws. This kind of blessing was equivalent to a huge increase in resistance for no reason, and could only be described as insane. A mere yellow earth elemental attack that landed on Loken's body was of no use at all, but what appeared now was a ferocious attack that contained almost half of Northren's earth elemental power. It was hard to imagine that this kind of ultra-high purity earth elemental energy was released by a little human like Duque. For a moment, Loken saw an illusion. The earth suddenly surged, and countless grains of sand formed a sand wave that connected the sky and the earth. This raging wave of earth elemental energy directly drowned Loken's huge body, and all that was left was a scream. "Impossible!" The one who let out a whisper was Torim, who had just escaped death. The surging wave of earth elemental energy had smashed Loken's body out of the Church of Wisdom in just a few steps. Unfortunately, as Loken waved his arm, the Church of Wisdom suddenly blossomed with a blazing red flame, counteracting most of the yellow light. "Who are you?" Loken's face, which had always been full of confidence, finally revealed a horrified expression. Duque's body fell backwards, and a huge existence seemed to grow out from beneath his feet, supporting Duque's entire body. Loken immediately noticed that the thing that was supporting Duque was a huge palm that was wrapped in flames. What made his expression change even more was that there was an existence that was frantically tearing at the protective barrier of the Church of Wisdom, forcefully shoving in power that did not belong to the entire temple. "In the name of the Wisdom King, I reject your entry." Loken slammed his fist on the ground. Unexpectedly, the smiling human disappeared and was replaced by a male human wearing a white mage robe with blue edges. He held a drumstick in his left hand and a long, strange sword in the shape of a long spiral nail in his right. The two of them had similar but different appearances. This time, the existence with the appearance of a human that came later released a nearly overwhelming and terrifying divine power. The newcomer was none other than Duque himself. In the name of the Guardian of Azeroth, I reject your rejection. Duque tapped his staff, and the divine artifact Atisha's space-breaking power instantly erupted. The three illusory black crows let out sharp caws. The screams were not only unpleasant to the ears, but in Loken's ears, it was worse than a death knell. This was because when the crow's caw spread out, the spatial barriers he had set up in the Wisdom Temple started to collapse one by one. As the force restraining the intruder weakened, the flaming arm that supported Duque began to extend longer and longer. It was obvious that the owner of the flaming arm was crawling out of the portal that opened on the floor of the temple. No! Loken raised his 10 thick fingers and gestured with his spell in an attempt to mend the spatial barriers of the temple. Just then, a violent tremor came from the bottom of the temple. Thud, thud, thud. The deep and rhythmic bombardment seemed to be shaking the foundations of the temple. Impossible unless it's... Loken finally cried out in shock. A mysterious smile appeared on Duque's face. Yes, that unless you mentioned is here. Thud, thud, thud. At this point, there was no longer a need for special detection or perception. As long as one was not blind, they could see that a giant of the same size as Loken was climbing up the steep mountain wall below the temple. Under normal circumstances, there would be no place for a giant to step on the mountain wall. The newcomer obviously had a better idea. Every move he made would summon the earth element within the mountain wall. The earth responded to his call, arching out handrails and stepping stones for the giant to stand on. The giant seemed to be moving very slowly, but the handrails and stepping stones on the mountain wall would move on their own, as if the giant was taking an elevator. This should be some kind of special skill similar to ground shrink, right? Loken's golden face turned pale. As a senior among the Guardians of Azeroth, he naturally knew who the newcomer was. He finally squeezed out a name from between his teeth. Alcaphon. Around the temple, the cold wind howled. On the huge floating corridor that connected the Wisdom Temple and the Stone Hall, countless ice and snow were gathering. A giant that was 10 stories tall was forming out of thin air. Suddenly, thunder rumbled in the sky. A lightning giant appeared out of nowhere and began to descend slowly into the temple. No. Impossible. For you. How can you command the 4 guardians of Alcaphon? Loken was furious as he glared at the smiling Duque. At this moment, Duque was sitting on the shoulder of the fire giant that rose from the portal on the floor of the temple. That's right, the 4 guardians of the treasury, Alcaphon, Emeron, Corellon, and Turun. Duque put away the song of light and shadow, and raised his right index finger, shaking it in a smug manner. Stain, 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 stain. I only told the 4 guardians that Odor's guardian, Loken, had been corrupted by Yogg-Saron. He went against the Titan's orders and started to harm his comrades. Then I shared what I saw with them. At this point, the biggest secret of Alcaphon's treasury was finally revealed. The 4 great guardians weren't guarding any equipment at all, but elements. As the 4 elements that formed the world, they had irreplaceable roles. The status of the 4 guardians was below Odor's guardian and the Pentashade guardian dragon. The 4 of them played a supporting role. They would provide the guardians with enough elements to support the operations of Odor and the dragon's slumber temple. But on the other hand, the 4 guardians of the treasury had similar duties as the guardians. If the laboratory left behind by the Titan collapsed, or if the guardian ancient god was in danger of breaking free, the 4 guardians had the same duty to eliminate the danger. Since it was proven that Loken had betrayed the Titan, there was nothing wrong with the 4 guardians jumping out to do their work. Of course, under normal circumstances, the 4 of them would never know what happened to Odor. After all, Loken had always been very secretive and beautiful. But Duque had tipped them off. Chapter 1598. Loken was still struggling. This struggle was destined to be hopeless and futile. Just like how he had tortured Torim like a dog, he was now the one being tortured. What he had done before was, to put it bluntly, worthless. Loken, who was in charge of wisdom in Audiobook, did not have a specific element. Being proficient in none meant that he was proficient in everything. Since he knew that Torim, the king of storms, was coming for trouble, Loken only needed to remove all the wind elements in the temple first. Then, a guardian like Torim, who only had one element, would be mostly useless and would only be left for him to torture. Loken could play this trick on Torim, but he definitely could not do it in front of Duque. Duque was a rare demigod with multiple elements and attributes. Loken initially used the earth element, which was the opposite of the wind element, to fill the space in the temple. Duque's first move was to use Alcafon's earth element to attack Loken. However, the speed of the earth element was too slow, and the sneak attack was unsuccessful. Loken turned to counterattack with the fire element. An ordinary powerhouse might have been beaten to the ground by this counterattack. Duque was also well prepared. He switched to Corellon, the guardian of flames, on the spot. I have all 4 elements on my side. Loken, how do you want to die? Take your pick. When the 4 elemental guardians gathered in the Temple of Wisdom, and there was also a demigod who was good at spatial magic, no one was in a good mood. Duque stood tall with Corellon's support. This time, Duque, who was standing on the giant's shoulder, had the same line of sight as Loken. Duque raised his chin high, showing Loken his nostrils. Although the size of a human's nostrils were 2 tiny black dots that were almost negligible in Loken's eyes, Duque's meaning was conveyed. I'm telling you, I'm your master. Your master will always be your master. As the king of wisdom, how could Loken be convinced that the death trap he had painstakingly schemed was broken by a mere human? Even if Duque was now a demigod, it was still unacceptable. Loken would be the first to object if his 25,000 years of experience were wiped out so easily. No. Do you think this is the end? Do you think you can force me to surrender just like that? You've underestimated me. You've underestimated the great Yogg-Saron. Loken raised both of his arms high in the air. In the blink of an eye, his boss, there's a silly dragon, Yogg-Saron had responded to his call. Under the noses of Torim, the 4 guardians, and Duque, several thick black thorns suddenly extended from the void beside the Church of Wisdom. As soon as these black octopus-like tentacles appeared, they began to wrap around the 3 thick pillars on the west side of the Wisdom Temple. The thorns on the thorns pierced into the pillars, like mosquitoes sucking blood, the seemingly hard thorns bulging. It felt like a symbiotic relationship, but it also felt like they were absorbing nutrients from Loken's nest. This was originally an act to dig out Loken's roots and destroy his nest. Loken looked like a martyr who was willing to die for a just cause, causing Duque to feel a headache coming on. Damn, the ancient god's brainwashing technique is really amazing. Fortunately, I already have a backup plan. Letting an ancient god deal with an ancient god was undoubtedly the most efficient way. Recently, Duque had gotten used to asking Elune to be his fighter. When it came to fighting against evil, Elune had always spared no effort. Chandri's meteorite fell from the sky and taught Yogg-Saron a lesson. Bang! There was an earth-shattering sound. The meteor did not hit the temple. Instead, it smashed into the void. In the seemingly empty air, intense waves suddenly appeared. Those were spatial ripples. It was hard for Yogg-Saron to break through space to save his little brother before he could completely break free from his cage. Anywhere with the sky, even without the need for night, could be considered Elune's home ground. Yogg-Saron seemed to have realized this. Compared to a pawn like Loken that could be thrown away after being used, his health was the most important. Without even hesitation, Yogg-Saron retreated. Loken's golden face was pitch black in despair as he stared at the retreating brambles in the void. In the temple, there were still a few huge black vines wrapped around the pillars, but those completely withered vines were now just ugly decorations, useless decorations. No, master. How can you abandon me like this? I have painstakingly planned for centuries for you, Before Loken could finish muttering to himself in despair, he was suddenly blocked by a huge figure in front of him. Tarim, the Storm King Tarim, who had killed his wife. On the giant thunder hammer in Tarim's hand, the terrifying lightning that bloomed was getting brighter and brighter, and the rumbling sound of thunder was incessant. At this moment, the two ancient guardians heard the voice of Duke's soul in their ears. It was a slightly mocking statement. Yo, Tarim, now you can have a fair battle with Loken. Fair? Fair my ass. The reason why the King of Wisdom could abuse Tarim was because he could use elements and resources at will, excluding all the wind elements that Tarim was good at. Now that the four guardians of the Alcafen treasury were here, ensuring that the four major elements could enter unimpeded, this in itself was the greatest help to Tarim. If Loken could still find his parents now, he would definitely complain about Duke for being biased. Duke smiled without saying a word. I'm just being biased, so what? If you have the guts, ask Yogg-Saron to come out and die. Once the matter is done, I'll leave without hiding my achievements and fame. Duke opened a portal and slipped away. To be precise, this guy returned to Karazhan and shamelessly turned on a huge magic mirror that was more than 15 meters tall, comparable to an IMAX movie screen, and shamelessly turned on a paid broadcast. Coming. Place your bets. The Battle of the Ages. Storm King Tarim versus Wisdom King Loken, who do you bet on to win? Dumuk called out to his harem, sat on the custom-made big bed, took out popcorn, and became a spectator. Beside him, Duke's lovers giggled and leaned forward, their jade bodies spread out as they watched this fair battle with Duke. The outcome of the battle was already decided. He knew all of them, and none of them were proficient. On the other hand, this meant that no matter what, they were all half-baked. When low-density elements met higher-density elements, defeat was the only outcome. Suppressed by the four guardians, Loken, who no longer had the home field advantage, struggled to defeat Tarim with arcane magic. In the end, his arcane energy ball was directly smashed by a hammer. Another hammer hit, and Loken's left shoulder caved in. Another hammer hit, and Loken's right arm was smashed to pieces at the elbow. Tarim sat on Loken's stomach like a gangster fighting on the street, raised his two huge fists the size of a house, and smashed them down repeatedly. This punch is for heave. Chapter 1599. 10 minutes later, the Titan Guardian, the King of Wisdom, Loken, was smashed to pieces just like that. Duke and the Alliance's higher-ups watched as Loken's golden face was deformed by Tarim's thunderous punches. First, his nose, which was originally quite straight, was smashed into the shape of a lion's nose. Then, his nose was smashed into his cheek. Then, his protruding cheekbones were flattened by the punches. Tarim, who was extremely resentful, smashed Loken's facial features into a mess. Perhaps even Loken's creator, the Titan's mother, could not recognize him. Even so, the Guardian's strong vitality was still supporting Loken. This guy was actually not dead yet. Since Loken was not dead, it was naturally not the end. Tarim was not satisfied after smashing Loken's dog head, so he used his small house-sized fists to pound Loken's chest. Boom, boom, boom. His huge fists smashed down, directly smashing Loken's high ground into a depression. When Duke yelled, "Small fists to pound Loken's chest," Duke's harem was in an uproar. Several people who were drinking spat out their drinks on the spot. Jaina, who accidentally splashed herself, was even more embarrassed and angry as she performed the official version of "Small fists to pound Loken's chest." Naturally, this kind of flirtatious boxing was treated as a massage. Duke laughed out loud. However, it was easy to have a bad temper when playing with storms. Duque glanced at Queen Sylvanas, hugged her in his arms, and took a whiff. Yo, Sylvanas. We all play with storms and thunder, don't learn from him. Queen Sylvanas rolled her eyes at Duque. Then please take care of our feelings, don't die so easily. If you die, I will definitely treat my enemies more cruelly than Tarim. But... Queen Sylvie stretched out her fair arms and hugged Duke. She responded to Duke's demand with enthusiasm, For the sake of your loyalty, I will let you have your way with me. For the sake of your loyalty, I can give you a special option today. That's possible. Women are emotional creatures. When they saw that Duque had helped Torim, allowing this righteous man to avenge his wife, they couldn't help but have a better impression of Duque. Those who were willing to mess around stayed, while the rest tactfully retreated. On the other side, Torim had finally destroyed Loken completely. He panted heavily, and the strong light of lightning flowed out from his nostrils. Loken's filthy soul still wanted to escape, but with a single thought from Torim, a bolt of lightning struck down from the sky, blasting Loken's soul into pieces. The King of Wisdom, Loken, no longer existed in this world. Duque, Ilun, and the Sleeping Dragon Temple had no objections to Torim's approach. Towards this kind of traitor who sold out his teammates and pushed his companions into the fire pit, no matter what he did, it was not too much to punish him. At first, Alexstrasza wanted to ask if she could interrogate Oder for his information. However, since both Torim and Duque said that there was no need, then forget about it. Duque was the one leading the attack on Oder, and Torim, the local guardian, was the one leading the way. Both of them said that it was fine. Naturally, there was no need to spend a lot of effort to search Loken's rotten soul. Searching one's soul was always accompanied by risks. No one knew what other abilities or tricks the ancient gods had up their sleeves. If they were careless and fell for it, it would be another guardian-level powerhouse falling. They really couldn't afford to pay this price in the current situation. After everything was settled, Torim looked at Mark Dooku, who appeared beside him, and frowned. "You've gone back." In reality, Duque, who had already started the duel with Queen Sylvie and had just finished using Armor Break and launched 999 consecutive backstab attacks, was obviously very busy, but through the puppet Mark, he said with a straight face, "I just saved a batch of Titan runes for the current Magic Guardian Dragon, Maligos. I need time to sort them out." "You've worked hard too." "Yeah, I've worked hard." Duque replied with a double meaning. "Thanks. I hope you understand that I have my duty." "I understand. But when the matter with Oder is over, if there's anything within the scope of my duty, I won't refuse." "Yeah, I'll thank you in advance." Duque would never complain about having too many thugs, especially those who had stepped into the divine realm. One had to know that Torim was not the god of hammers. He was the thunder god of the world of Azeroth, Thor. After killing Loken, there naturally wouldn't be the lightning hall that Loken had originally presided over in history. One could imagine how crazy Yogg-Saron would be after losing Loken, an agent who was familiar with Oder's situation. After all, many of its arrangements had been pushed back. Not only that, when the four guardians of the Alcavan treasury joined forces with Torim, Yogg-Saron also remotely controlled its new subordinates to stop expanding outward and shrink the line of defense. At this time, Torim made a request for the Sleeping Dragon Temple and Duque to join forces to send a powerhouse group to attack Oder. Originally, Duque hoped that he could free up his hands to command the allied forces to advance on the east and west lines, but now it seemed like an extravagant hope. After all, Torim revealed a shocking piece of news. "I don't regret killing Loken, but I have to tell you something very important. During the time when Loken was under control, Oder's defense mechanism had not been activated because all the guardians were theoretically still alive. But with Loken's death, Oder's surveillance mechanism will be activated. A Titan guardian named Observer Orgaren will go to planet Azeroth to inspect after receiving news of Loken's destruction." Inspect. If dragons could explode, the dragon aspects would probably explode into balls of fur. Duque did not know what inspection meant in the eyes of the guardians. In any case, when he saw that apart from the heartless Onyxia who didn't care about protection, the other dragon aspects were so scared that their scales were standing on end, he knew that these fellows had been traumatized by this. Torim continued, "Loken recently threw a few guardians into Oder to brainwash Yogg-Saron. This matter may be easy to solve. After all, for those brainwashed guardians, as long as enough pressure is given, they can be reactivated, which is to restore their sanity." The humanoid red dragon sister patted her full chest. Not bad, not bad. No, what I'm going to say next is the main point. After Orgeron's inspection, he will only come to two conclusions. The first is that he will send a code called Alpha to the Pantheon. That means that although the situation is troublesome, it can still be controlled and should continue to be observed. However, I just asked Odor's main control system. The system said that in a world like Azeroth that has been heavily influenced and distorted by the ancient gods, after calculation, Orgeron will send a second code to destroy Azeroth. The probability of Omega is 99%. Chapter 1600. As soon as he said this, the dragon aspects were all stunned. Orgeron has actually already set off, but in order to delay his arrival, I sent him the wrong coordinates in the name of Loken's last words. It's a hidden black hole, and even he won't be able to come out so easily. This way, he'll arrive at Azeroth a little later. Even so, I estimate that we can only buy about an extra month or so. The worst-case scenario is a week. When Orgeron comes out, he'll definitely realize that something is wrong. He'll retrieve the star map of the universe from 25,000 years ago and find the correct coordinates of Azeroth. Our task is very heavy. Not only do we have to attack Yogg-Saron as soon as possible and restore order in Audor, but we also have to stop Orgeron before the Omega destruction signal is transmitted. Otherwise, the Titan will come to Azeroth again and destroy all civilizations and creatures, including us incompetent guardians. This time, no one was optimistic. No one doubted the power of the Titan of the Pantheon. As the creator of the Guardians and Dragon aspects, when the Titan created them, not only did he imprint absolute obedience in their souls, but he also hid a self-destruction code or something. To destroy them, it would only take a single thought. Even if they fell like Loken and had their self-destruction code removed by the ancient gods, it would be useless. The combat power of the Titan was absolute. Didn't they see how happy the ancient gods of Azeroth were back then? Didn't the Titan get beaten like dogs when they arrived? As soon as Torim said this, the atmosphere became gloomy and gloomy. The dragon aspects looked at each other and suddenly realized that they could only rely on the power of mortals this time. Nozdormu and Isra had to watch over their respective territories. They could leave for a short period of time, but they couldn't fight for a long time. Alexstrasza and her Red Dragon army were essentially fighting against Arthas' Scourge army and couldn't leave. Of course, it could be said that she was helping the Alliance fight against the Scourge army. The problem was that Arthas was causing trouble, and the first to suffer was the Dragonbone Waste where the dragon race's nest was located. Although they had a grudge with the Second Fool before, the Alliance came to help from across the ocean. If the Alliance really went back on their word, the first to suffer would be Dragon Sleep God Palace. Kalegos. Alright then, although he was announced as the new Blue Dragon King and a Magic Guardian Dragon, no one had high hopes for his combat strength. Onyxia will follow you to Orger. Speaking of which, the Dragon Slumber Holy Temple had sent out a whole big circle, and it was still Onyxia who the F***CK she was. The Black Dragon Princess was sent by Duque to help the Dragon Slumber Shrine. In the end, the Red Dragon Sister was embarrassed. Duque, the Sleeping Dragon Temple owes you another favor. When the time comes, we won't go back on our words. Duque chuckled at Big Sis Red Dragon's words. Treat it as a fart. What a joke. Forget it. If I hadn't saved you back then, you would still be working like a slave for the Beastmen. Duque didn't say anything. That was what his eyes said, and the Red Dragon Sister really understood what he meant. She whimpered like a small animal. The two veteran dragon aspects rolled their eyes at the same time. You're a disgrace to us dragons. Things were basically settled like that. Duque returned to the Alliance and made arrangements at the Throne Conference. The Western Front would be guarded by Muradin and Kurdran, and the Eastern Front would be guarded by William's team of 3. Apart from that, almost all the Alliance's powerhouses would be transferred to attack Orger. Magni loudly muttered, "All right. Dragons, Titan Guardians, Ancient Gods, Lich Kings, Almost all the troublemakers that can be imagined have come to Northrend. The Alliance might as well change its name to Salvation Alliance. William spread his hands. When have we not saved the world? The radiant Queen Sylvanas lightly tapped the table with her knuckles. Rejoice, at least there's no burning legion at this time. Queen Sylvanas' words made sense, and the Dwarf King could only shrug and raise the wine glass in his hand. All right, let's toast to kill Leiden, whose but was stuck in the Sunwell portal and died. Very naturally, only the group of rowdy dwarves raised their glasses with him, and the other leaders just smiled. No matter how anxious they were, the necessary preparations still had to be done. Because of Loken's early death, the entire defense system of Orger had been activated without Yogg-Saron even needing to stir up trouble. Before entering the core area of Orger, they had to pass through the city wall area. Although Duque himself knew what was inside, he didn't have the excuse of being a spy of the Burning Legion this time, so he couldn't lie and say that he knew all the secrets of the Titans. Hence, with the explanation of the new guide, Torim, the Alliance knew what was in the city wall area. First was the absolute forbidden spell formation. To be precise, it was the Titan runic spell formation that prohibited flying objects. Anything that was more than 100 meters above the ground would be instantly destroyed by the spell formation. This eliminated the possibility of using the flying battleships to flatten the area. Secondly, before seeing the first boss at the door, the blazing behemoth, they had to fight a medium-sized local battle. This was because from the moment they entered the door, thousands of guards would rush out to meet the invaders, like Duque. From the E-cast steel defender, which was the size of a human and looked like a dwarf made of steel, but was actually powered by low-level Titan runes, to the rune-etched statue, which was a 2-story tall iron rail puppet, to the mechanical gnome battle tank, which looked like a spider, and to the messy, mechanical attack plane 54A, that looked like a helicopter. Anyway, there was a bunch of lifeless mechanical guards that had enough energy to almost perpetual motion blocking the way. If they didn't dismantle all these guys into scrap metal, they wouldn't be able to enter Orger. As a last resort, Duque had Magni prepare a batch of specially modified tanks. These were super tanks that were based on the main battle tanks of the Iron Furnace Castle, with Torim providing the materials, and Duque's newly developed, secretly learned, Titan runes to strengthen them. Only such a tank could easily destroy the guards left behind by the Titans. As for the modifications, that was the job of the great gnome craftsman, Gerben. He and Magni would naturally lead the dwarves and gnome craftsmen from the Iron Furnace Castle to work overtime day and night to complete the modifications. During this period of time, Duque was basically focused on studying the Titan runes left behind by Maligos in Karazhan. Suddenly, one night there was a knock on the door. After sensing for a while, Duque said, "Come in." It was Onyxia who came in. Unexpectedly, Onyxia came in wearing a Christmas princess outfit. Cosplay? Chapter 1601. Duque was dumbfounded. Damn, there was still a long time before Christmas. The Black Dragon, who had transformed into Countess Katrana, was practically fully armed. A red victorious battle suit, suspenders, and a red and white Christmas hat. As long as Santa Claus was male, he wouldn't be able to resist. "What are you doing, princess?" Duke was never one to reject his family's sugar-coated bullets or sugar-coated bombs. After Duque's godly sword went through a simple explanation of the dragon's lair, this silly female dragon finally revealed the truth of the matter. She consciously lowered her posture and forced an awkward smile onto her face. "Will we be punished by the Titans?" Duque laughed so hard that his 8-pack abs could be seen. After all this time, it turned out that this female dragon was still afraid of death. Duque pressed the dragon's head down. "Don't talk, savor it carefully." Onyxia rolled her eyes at Duque, but still did as she was told. Only when he was comfortable as the host was he willing to reveal some useful information. According to Valen's testimony, 25,000 years ago, Sargeras, a member of the Titans, betrayed the Pantheon and dealt a heavy blow to the Pantheon. Then he roped in the 2 giants of Eridar, kill Jaden and Archimonde. Only then did the Burning Crusade begin. Thousands of planets fell and turned into a sea of fire. Xianxia listened quietly, not slacking off in her work. There's no doubt that the Titans are powerful. Even after 25,000 years, the protective spell formation left by the Titans is still protecting Azeroth from the Burning Legion's direct attacks. Then let's make a hypothesis. If the Titans are fine, why don't they go and find trouble with the Burning Legion? When Duque said this, Xianxia's eyes lit up. As smart as she was, she quickly thought of the crux of the matter. That's right. The Titans can't do it. The heavy blowback then was absolutely devastating. Otherwise, they would have been beaten by Sargeras to hide in some subspace and seal themselves. In any case, they would definitely be in a state of immobility. Otherwise, the Burning Legion wouldn't be so unscrupulous. Xianxia's eyes lit up and then dimmed again. Don't worry too much. The Titans' disappearance wasn't necessarily a good thing, nor was it a bad thing. As the strongest race in the universe, even if the Titans died, it was impossible for them to be completely wiped out. Think about it, the creations they left behind were still functioning normally after 25,000 years. Wasn't that proof of their greatness? If the Burning Legion really revives once more, then the Titans will definitely stand against the Legion in a certain way at a critical moment. Duque gently caressed the back of Xianxia's neck. For dragons, even in human form, that was undoubtedly where their reverse scale was. But for a dragon who had lost her will and only wanted to seek refuge at this moment, it was just a proof of her loyalty to Duke and tame him. As she breathed, Xianxia let out a sound similar to that of a satisfied cat. Duque encouraged her, "Don't worry too much. Just based on my achievement of sending Sargeras' soul into the bottomless abyss, even if the Titans were to jump out again, they would only reward me and not blame me. The planet is no different from a pebble on the roadside to the Titans. As long as I can deal with Sargeras, I can ask them for the entire planet Azeroth as my possession. It's just a matter of a word. So, Xianxia, you're destined to be my possession." Being declared so domineeringly that she was his possession, Xianxia wasn't angry. Instead, her whole body trembled, and an expression of joy appeared on her face. Duque took the opportunity to move his sword directly with his mind, and released a continuous stream of arcane impact with the divine sword. He almost made Xianxia roll her eyes. Well, damn it, why can't I look directly at the words Dragonmaw Clan in the future? Speaking of which, Duque's words were actually 70% true and 30% false. As a transmigrator, how could he not know that the Titans had already typed GG in the battle with Sargeras 25,000 years ago while cursing at Sargeras' entire family? But a creation Titan was a creation Titan. You're still a creation Titan after 25,000 years. Since a half-baked demigod like Duque had the theoretical possibility of unlimited resurrection. How could the Titans not have a way out? The Titans did die, but that was in the physical sense. The problem was that their souls were still there. Apart from being unable to jump out and fight Sargeras head-on, the Titans' magical powers were still beyond the reach of the natives of Azeroth. That was why in the original battle with the Burning Legion in history, the Titans in their soul form jumped out to play the god weapon distribution, in order to maximize the strengthening of the people of Azeroth and fight against the Legion. Naturally, Duque wouldn't reveal too much about what happened in history. In any case, it was enough for Xianxia to understand that only by following him could Duque have a way out. To control this fellow who had a lot of ideas, it was necessary to stimulate him from time to time and maintain a sense of urgency. Perhaps this was the so-called way of dragon mastery. A week was a necessary time to attack Otter. It couldn't be helped. In addition to a large number of guards, there was also a strange restriction in the city wall area of Otter. It was something similar to planet Azeroth's protective array formation, except that it prohibited demigods and above from entering through the front door. It was the same teleportation portal that led to Otter's independent space. Existences below demigod level would be sent to the city wall area, while powerhouses above demigod level would be directly sent to the Guardian Temple area. Why can't we directly break into the Guardian Temple area with demigod-level combat power? Torim, don't you have a shortcut to the inside? Duque had asked such a question before. Torim replied, yes, but that way, we won't be able to save the rest of the Guardians. Loken's death has already alarmed Yogg-Saron. According to his habits, when we enter, we will probably be directly teleported to the Stairway of Madness where Yogg-Saron is. At that time, we will face the siege of Yogg-Saron and his direct subordinates, as well as the 3 Guardians. On the contrary, if it's a powerhouse in the realm of ordinary heroes attacking, Yogg-Saron will ignore it and let Otter's defense system operate? Torim said with certainty, yes, so the best time for us to join the battle is to wait until the mortal powerhouses defeat my colleagues and restore them to normal. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. After fighting for so long, he finally felt a little lonely at the top. King against king, general against general. It was not good for Duque to participate in low-level battles. Firstly, it would be a waste of combat power, and secondly, it would deprive his partners of the opportunity to advance. Duque didn't know how many people had the opportunity to advance to demigod level, but every advancement must be a powerhouse who had been honed through trials of blood and fire. He had no reason to take away their opportunity. Chapter 1602. When Duque announced at the Alliance throne meeting that he would not personally participate in the battle before Otter's Stairway of Madness, and asked Torim to explain himself, the leaders of the Alliance revealed complicated expressions. In the past, even when Duque ascended to become a demigod, everyone still did not feel that it was real. After all, it seemed that Duque had not changed much. He was still in charge of the Alliance, maintaining the internal and logistical operations with the momentum of 1 man against 1,000. 1,000 internal officials could not compare to 1 Duque. This was already an iron law. While advancing to a demigod, Duque did not forget the development of the Alliance. He was still the beacon that guided the development of technology and civilization. Originally, the atmosphere was not bad, but with the birth of the 2nd demigod in the Alliance, things seemed to have changed. Servana's apotheosis was more like an invisible stimulus that stimulated everyone to pursue higher realms and greater power. Otherwise, they would be pulled down. Duque indeed said, everyone, work hard. I hope that in 10 years, most of you here will be able to become demigods. The Burning Legion will make a comeback in 10 years at most. When that time comes, it is very likely that we will have to face the big 3 of the Legion at their peak, as well as the various Void Lords. That's right, because of the existence of the Planetary Protection Array. Even if the demons of the Burning Legion could forcefully descend, their strength would be greatly reduced. Everyone could kill the Void Lords that were reduced to dogs, but they might not be able to kill the original. This was because when the demons' health, strength, magic, and other indicators were several times stronger than before, their strength was no longer increased by a few times, but by dozens of times in minutes. Without enough peerless powerhouses, they could not even withstand the prelude of the Legion's return. When all the fields were destroyed, the mountains and rivers were polluted, and there was a lack of sources of food and drinking water, how long could the lonely main cities hold on? Netherio died, and so did Malygos. Onyxia and Calegos, who had replaced them, could only match up to the power of one of the original dragon aspects. In fact, they might even be far from being as good as, in the most ideal situation, the Planetary Defense Array would only have 80% of its power left. The Burning Legion's determination to destroy Azeroth, coupled with the fact that they did not know how to prevent the civil war between the Bronze Dragons, Duque could foresee that with the fall of Nozdormu in the future, the defense circle of the planet would be further weakened. When the barrier was no longer a barrier, he could only rely on these mortal experts in front of him. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. No matter how strong Duque was individually, it was impossible for him to fend off all the demons. It was no exaggeration to say that whether or not these people could become demigods would determine the fate of the entire Azeroth. This was the reason why Duque had to let them train. Everyone had a fire burning in their hearts, and they were secretly suppressing it. No matter if it was for his own people, for his own country, for the Alliance, or even for this world, he had to become a demigod. Those below the level of demigod are ants. Then, on the day of the expedition, after entering Alder, the atmosphere suddenly changed. Wait, Duque, didn't you say you weren't coming? Everyone was shocked to see Duque sitting on a tank with a huge cannon barrel. Duke Marcus said he wasn't coming, but that doesn't mean Mark Dooku isn't coming. Duque was seriously farting. Sophistry. Shameless. Pervert. Seconded. A group of Alliance experts jeered. F*CKU, didn't you say you would let us go alone? We've done so much mental preparation and mental struggle. You're actually here again. Facing the bombardment, no matter how shameless Duque was, he could only admit defeat. I'm only going to fight the first stage. I'll run after killing the flaming beasts. Why? Sally Whitemane asked. Unknowingly, Duque had his arms around Magni, Bu Lang, Jurbin, and a few other dwarves. They looked like they were tap dancing, and they smiled incomprehensibly. Giant ships and cannons, this is a man's romance. Duque pointed into the distance. Look, it's more advanced than us, but it's from an ancient civilization. Brothers, do you see that? Magni raised his hand to cover his forehead. He stood on his tiptoes and looked into the distance. I see it, it's the crystallization of technology that transcends time. Bu Lang jumped onto his big brother's shoulder and waved his fist excitedly. I see it, it's an even more awesome cannon. Jurbin jumped onto Bu Lang's shoulder, and the three dwarves started building a human ladder. He waved his wrench. I see it, it's the call of the future. The group of Alliance experts was speechless. They looked like they were saying, "You're all dirty. I can't stand you technological maniacs." Generally speaking, there were 3 types of vehicles modified with Titan runes. The first was the Mammoth tank, which focused on defense. Not only did it have 3 layers of armor, but it also used the wreckage of the Burning Legion's interstellar battleship floating in the Azeroth Void battlefield. They broke off the relatively intact armor and had the help of the dragons. It took them a long time to cut it out. It was equipped with 4 105mm howitzers with various beginner-level Titan rune shells. A round of shots would definitely make the enemy wish they were dead. The second type was the Katyusha self-propelled rocket launcher, which focused on long-range firepower. Other than the insane pseudo-missile system, there was also a human cannon, which was specially used to knock people out, to deal with the boss Flame Behemoth. The third type was the Harley motorcycle that Duque and the other dwarves were riding. Duque, who had transformed into Mark Dooku, stretched out his right middle finger and pushed against the large sunglasses in front of his eyes. He said in a low voice, "Does everyone know the rules? Where were you when I won the Lockermaden Snow Rally 36 times in a row?" Magni also stretched out his short middle finger and pushed against his goggles. Let me, Dan Morrow's racing god, show you what real racing skills are. Bu Lang twisted the motorcycle's accelerator. With the brakes locked, the rear wheel gave off a puff of white smoke from the friction with the ground. Just in time to use my Kill You 3000 wheel supercharging system. Don't forget to see my taillights. The dwarf craftsman Jurbin stretched out his short legs and stepped on the custom-made accelerator. The 4 of them were completely in the zone, full of energy. In 5 rounds, the one who pulls back the most number of guardians will be the winner, Duque said loudly. The winner will receive the title, Mount Akina's racing god, Magni said. The loser will leave behind the emblem. Those who don't pull enough guardians, fall off the bike, or get their bikes destroyed will be considered losers, Bu Lang said. By the way, what kind of place is Mount Akina? Jurbin asked. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.